A fake marriage to the city's most dangerous mafia boss. That was the price to save everything she had left. Elena Carter thought she'd lost it all: her fortune, her family's legacy, her faith in love itself. But standing in the rain with 30 days until total ruin, she never imagined the sleek black car that stopped inches from her body would carry the man who'd change everything. Lorenzo Vieri didn't offer rescue. He offered a deal. And in his world, deals were bound in blood, power, and secrets that could destroy her or set her free. If you're hooked, stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The rain hit harder than Elena expected, each drop feeling like a tiny fist against her skin as she stood outside the community center on 7th Avenue. The support group had just let out. 12 people with 12 different versions of heartbreak, all sitting in a circle like some kind of broken rosary. She'd stopped going weeks ago, but tonight desperation had dragged her back, searching for something she couldn't name. Answers, maybe. Or just proof that she wasn't the only person whose life had collapsed so completely that getting out of bed felt like an achievement. It hadn't helped. Elena pulled her coat tighter, though it did nothing against the cold that had settled into her bones. The fabric was expensive once. Cashmere, tailored, the kind of thing she used to wear without thinking. Now it hung on her frame like a costume from someone else's life. The lining torn, one button missing. She'd stopped noticing those things. Stopped caring. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. It would be another creditor, another lawyer, another person reminding her that she had 29 days left before Carter Textiles, the company her grandfather built, the legacy her father bled for, went under completely. 30 days had sounded like breathing room when the bankruptcy judge said it. Now it felt like a countdown to execution. She walked without direction, her heels clicking unevenly on wet pavement. One heel had cracked last week. She'd superglued it. The glue was failing. The streets were emptier than usual for a Thursday night, most people smart enough to stay inside. Elena wasn't smart anymore. She'd proven that by marrying Marcus Hale, by trusting him with her company, her accounts, her stupid, naive heart. 3 years of marriage, and he'd walked away with everything except her name. Even that he'd tried to take, dragging her through a divorce so vicious her own lawyer had looked uncomfortable. "You signed the prenup," he'd said, like she needed reminding. He's entitled to nothing," she'd snapped. "He forged my signature on half those documents." "Prove it." She couldn't. Marcus had been too careful, too smart, too many steps ahead while she'd been playing at partnership like marriage actually meant something. Elena reached the corner of 7th and Amsterdam, waiting for the light even though no cars were coming. Habit. The kind ingrained by a childhood of etiquette classes and polite society. All those rules about how young women from good families should behave. Fat lot of good it had done her. The light changed. She stepped off the curb. Headlights exploded into her vision, bright, sudden, too close. She heard the squeal of brakes, felt her body freeze in that terrible moment between realization and impact, and then strong hands grabbed her waist and yanked her backward so hard she gasped. She stumbled into someone solid, someone who smelled like expensive cologne and rain-soaked wool. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the car, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows, stopped exactly where she'd been standing half a second ago. "Careful." The voice behind her was male, low, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe. "The light means nothing if you're not watching." Elena twisted free, her pulse still racing, and turned to face her rescuer. He was tall, taller than Marcus, broader through the shoulders, with dark hair slicked back from a face that could have been carved from marble, if marble could look that dangerous. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes so dark they were almost black in the dim streetlight. He wore a suit that probably cost more than a rent, perfectly tailored, not a drop of rain on him despite the downpour. The car door opened. A driver stepped out, equally well-dressed, holding an umbrella. "Miss Carter?" the man said, and Elena's stomach dropped. "How do you know my name?" He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I know a lot of things. Get in the car." "Excuse me?" "You're soaked. It's late, and you were about to walk into traffic, which suggests you're not thinking clearly." He gestured to the open door. "I'm offering a ride." Elena took a step back. Every instinct she had left, and there weren't many, screamed danger. This man radiated it like heat, something predatory in the way he stood, the way he looked at her like she was a problem he'd already solved. "I don't get into cars with strangers," she said. "Smart policy." "Unfortunately, I'm not a stranger." He held out his hand. "Lorenzo Vieri." The name hit her like cold water. She'd heard it before, whispered in the same breath as words like organization and family and untouchable. Lorenzo Vieri wasn't just wealthy. He was dangerous, connected, the kind of man whose business stayed out of newspapers because newspapers knew better. "I know who you are," Elena said carefully, "which is exactly why I'm not getting in that car." Lorenzo lowered his hand, unbothered by her refusal. "Then let me be direct. You have 29 days before your company collapses. Your creditors are circling. Your father's health is failing from the stress. Your ex-husband is 3 days from finalizing a deal that will buy Carter Textiles for pennies on the dollar and strip it for parts. You're out of options, Miss Carter. Except one." Her chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the reason I'm here. I have a proposition." "I'm not interested in propositions from men like you." "Men like me?" Lorenzo repeated, something almost amused in his tone. "You don't know what kind of man I am." "I know enough." "Then you know I don't make offers lightly, and I don't make them twice." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "Get in the car, Elena, or go home to your studio apartment with the broken radiator and the neighbor who plays drums at 2 a.m., and spend the next 29 days watching everything your family built turn to ash. Your choice." How did he know about the radiator? About her neighbor? Elena's hands curled into fists, nails biting into her palms. She should walk away. Should tell this man, this criminal, to go to hell and take his proposition with him. But his words had hooked into something raw and desperate inside her, the part that had been screaming for weeks that she was failing, that she couldn't save anything, that she was going to be the Carter who lost it all. "One conversation," she heard herself say. "That's it." Lorenzo's smile widened just slightly. "That's all I need." The driver held the umbrella as Elena slid into the car, the leather seats warm despite the cold night. Lorenzo settled beside her, and the door closed with a heavy final sound. The driver returned to the front, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. Elena kept her body angled toward the door, ready to bolt if needed, though she had no idea what good that would do against a man like Lorenzo Vieri. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Wood smoke, maybe. Expensive cigar smoke. The kind her grandfather used to enjoy in his study before the cancer took him. "Where are we going, Whit?" she asked. "Nowhere. I find conversations are easier in privacy." Lorenzo poured something amber from a crystal decanter built into the side panel. "Scotch?" "No." "Suit yourself." He took a sip, completely relaxed, while Elena's nerves felt like live wires. "I'll be brief. I need a wife. You need capital and protection. I'm offering both." Elena laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You're offering marriage." "A marriage, there's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." Lorenzo set his glass down, his gaze steady on hers. "I'm not offering romance, Elena. I'm offering a contract. You marry me. In exchange, I clear your debts, save your company, and ensure your father receives the best medical care available. You'll want for nothing. And what do you get? Legitimacy, optics." He said it like he was discussing a business merger, which Elena supposed he was. "My world is complicated. A wife, the right kind of wife, opens certain doors, makes certain conversations easier. You come from old money, respectable family, the kind of pedigree that matters in circles I need to access. You want me to be your prop. I want you to be my partner in a mutually beneficial arrangement. You'll live in my home, attend events at my side, play the role of Mrs. Vieri. What happens behind closed doors stays there." Elena stared at him, trying to find the catch, the hidden knife in this offer. "For how long?" 2 years. After that, we divorce quietly. You walk away with a settlement that ensures you'll never worry about money again. Your company remains yours, profitable and secure. Everyone wins. Except I have to marry a criminal." Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Careful with words like that, Elena. They have consequences. Is that a threat? It's a fact. And for the record, I've never been convicted of anything. Because you're good at not getting caught. Because I'm careful about which laws I break and which I don't. He leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You're scared. That's smart. But you're also desperate, and desperation makes people foolish. I'm offering you a way out, a real one, not some fantasy where you suddenly make millions and save everything yourself. We both know that's not happening. The worst part was that he was right. Elena had spent weeks chasing impossible solutions, begging banks, pitching investors, trying to find anyone who'd take a chance on a company circling the drain. No one would. Carter Textiles was too far gone, the debt too deep, the market too competitive. She'd failed. Why me? She asked quietly. If you need legitimacy, there are plenty of women from respectable families who'd jump at this. True, but they'd want something you don't. What's that? Love. A real marriage. The fantasy? Lorenzo's voice held something almost like disdain. You've been through a divorce. You know what marriage really is, a contract, an exchange, two people using each other for mutual benefit. You're not going to expect flowers and anniversary dinners. You're not going to demand affection, I don't feel. You'll take the deal for what it is. Business. Elena swallowed hard. And if I say no, then I'll drop you at your apartment and you'll never see me again. No hard feelings, but no second chances either. The car had been circling the block, she realized, just driving in slow loops while they talked. Rain streaked down the windows, distorting the city lights into shapeless blurs. Outside this car, Elena had nothing. Inside it, she had a devil's bargain with a man who probably had blood on his hands. But he was also offering her father a chance to see the company survive, offering her a way to undo the catastrophe Marcus had created, offering her something, even if that something came wrapped in danger and moral compromise. I need time to think, she said. You have 5 minutes. We're pulling up to your building now. That's not enough time to... It's more than enough. You either want this or you don't. Lorenzo checked his watch. Expensive, understated, the kind that costs 6 figures. 4 minutes. Elena's mind raced. This was insane. This was wrong. This was exactly the kind of decision that would destroy what little remained of her life. But what life did she have left to destroy? A failing company, a father whose heart couldn't take much more stress, and a future working minimum wage because her business degree would be worthless without references Marcus had already poisoned. What would the rules be? She asked. You said it's controlled by rules. Simple ones. You'll live in my home but have your own space. You'll attend events as my wife and present a united front in public. You'll be respectful and discreet. In private, you'll have freedom to do as you please within reason. No affairs, no scandals, nothing that damages my reputation. I'll expect the same courtesy. And your business? Stays separate. You won't be involved. You won't ask questions. What I do isn't your concern. The car stopped. Elena looked out the window and recognized her building, a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that used to be trendy before the luxury developments pushed everyone out. Her apartment was on the 4th floor, no elevator, heat that barely worked, and walls so thin she could hear her neighbor's entire drum practice every night. 2 minutes, Lorenzo said softly. Elena closed her eyes, saw her father's face when the doctors said his blood pressure was dangerously high, saw the factory workers who'd been with Carter Textiles for decades, people who'd lose their pensions when the company folded. Saw Marcus's smug expression in the divorce proceedings, so certain he'd won. She opened her eyes. If I do this, if I have conditions... Lorenzo's eyebrow lifted slightly. Go on. My father can't know it's fake. He'd never accept it, and the stress would kill him. As far as he's concerned, this is real. Agreed. What else? I want full transparency on the financial arrangement. Every debt you're clearing, every investment in the company, all of it in writing and reviewed by a lawyer I choose. Done. Though I'll choose the lawyer, yours would take one look at me and refuse the case. Elena bristled but couldn't argue. Fine. And I want a way out. If this becomes unbearable, if I hurt you, Lorenzo's voice went very quiet. I won't. Whatever else I am, Elena, I don't harm women. That's a line I don't cross. She wanted to believe him, hated that some part of her did believe him, that his words carried a strange kind of certainty. 1 year, she said suddenly. Not 2. 1 year, and then we're done. 18 months, non-negotiable. Why? Because anything less looks suspicious. Marriages fail, but they don't fail in 12 months unless there's abuse or scandal. We need enough time to make it believable. Elena's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to stop the tremor. If I agree to this, when would... Tomorrow. We'll fly to Nevada, marry at a private chapel, return the same day. Your father will receive a call about a loan approval within the hour. Carter Textiles creditors will be contacted by Monday. Your apartment lease ends this month. Don't renew it. You'll move into my home next week. That's too fast. That's how it needs to be. I don't do anything halfway, Elena. If we're doing this, we do it completely, or not at all. Lorenzo held out his hand again, and this time it felt less like a greeting and more like a contract. Yes or no? Right now. This was the moment, the point of no return. Elena knew if she took his hand, everything would change. Not just her circumstances, but something fundamental about who she was. She'd be choosing survival over morality, practicality over principle. She'd be betting everything on a man she didn't know, didn't trust, couldn't predict. But she'd already lost everything betting on love. Maybe it was time to bet on something else. Elena reached out and placed her hand in Lorenzo's. His grip was firm, warm, completely steady while hers shook. Yes, she whispered. I'll do it. Lorenzo's smile was small, satisfied, the expression of a man who'd never doubted the outcome. Good. Be ready tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pack light. You won't need much of what you have. How will I... I'll send a car. He released her hand and opened the door. Rain blew in, immediately soaking her sleeve. One more thing, Elena. What? Don't tell anyone, not your father, not your friends, no one. As far as the world knows, we met months ago and kept it quiet. The story is that we fell in love, moved quickly, couldn't wait. Understand? She nodded, throat tight. Good. I'll see you tomorrow. Don't be late. Elena climbed out of the car, and the door closed before she could respond. The sedan pulled away smoothly, taillights disappearing into the rain, leaving her standing on the curb with her broken heel and her impossible decision and the feeling that she'd just signed something in blood. She walked into her building, climbed the 4 flights of stairs, and let herself into the apartment that would soon stop being hers. The radiator clanked uselessly. From upstairs, drums started up, a bass-heavy rhythm that shook the walls. Elena sank onto her second-hand couch and stared at her hand, the one Lorenzo had shaken. It still felt warm. What had she just done? The next morning arrived too quickly, dragged in by gray light and the sound of garbage trucks. Elena hadn't slept. She'd spent the night packing a small suitcase, then unpacking it, then packing it again, trying to decide what you brought to a fake marriage with a mafia boss. In the end, she settled on practical clothes, a few photos of her family, and the pearl necklace her grandmother had given her son. Everything else could stay. At 8:55 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car outside. Elena looked out the window and saw the same black sedan from last night, idling at the curb. No turning back now. She grabbed her suitcase, left her keys on the counter, and walked out of her old life. The driver, a different one from yesterday, just as professionally blank, took her suitcase and opened the door. Lorenzo sat inside, looking impossibly put together in a charcoal suit, his attention on his phone. He glanced up as she slid in. You're early. Good. You said don't be late. I say a lot of things. Most people ignore half of them. He tucked his phone away. Nervous? Should I be? Probably, but it's too late now. The car pulled into traffic, heading toward what Elena assumed was an airport. She watched the city slide past, familiar streets becoming unfamiliar territory, every mile taking her further from the person she used to be. Tell me about your father, Lorenzo said suddenly. Elena blinked. What? Your father, Robert Carter, 68, former CEO of Carter Textiles, currently in semi-retirement due to health issues. He'll need to believe this marriage is real, which means I need to know how to talk to him. What matters to him? The company. It's all he's ever cared about. More than you? The question stung because it was fair. He loves me, but the company is his legacy. It's what he built his whole life around. Losing it would destroy him. Then we'll make sure he doesn't lose it. Lorenzo's voice was matter of fact, like saving a failing textile company was as simple as ordering lunch. What else? Hobbies, interests, politics? He golfs. Used to anyway, before his blood pressure got bad. He's conservative, traditional. He'll probably hate that we move so fast, but he'll accept it because he's old-fashioned enough to think marriage is marriage. And your mother? Dead. Cancer. When I was 16. I'm sorry. Don't be. You didn't know her. Elena looked at him. What about your family? Lorenzo's expression closed off, subtle but definite. Not relevant. You asked about mine. Because yours will be part of our story. Mine won't. Why not? Because I said so. His tone made it clear the subject was finished. We'll be in Nevada by noon. The ceremony takes 15 minutes. We'll sign papers, exchange rings, and fly back. Tomorrow I'll call your father and ask for a formal meeting to introduce myself as your husband. You'll be there to sell the story. Think you can manage that? Elena swallowed the instinct to snap at him. She needed to get used to this. Lorenzo's blunt commands, his refusal to explain, his assumption that she'd simply obey. This was what she'd signed up for. Yes, she said. I can manage it. Good. There's a ring box in the glove compartment. Take whichever one fits. Elena leaned forward and opened the compartment. Inside were 3 ring boxes, each containing a diamond so large it looked obscene. She chose the smallest, a platinum band with a single emerald-cut stone that still probably cost more than her apartment, and slipped it on her left hand. It fit perfectly. How did you know my size? She asked. Lorenzo didn't look up from his phone. I know a lot of things. The rest of the drive passed in silence. They boarded a private jet at a small airfield, the kind of luxury Elena had grown up with but thought she'd lost forever. The plane was sleek, modern, staffed by a single flight attendant who offered champagne and breakfast and called Lorenzo Mr. Vieri, with the kind of deference that suggested fear. Elena sat across from Lorenzo, watching him work through emails like this was a normal Friday, like he wasn't about to marry a stranger. Maybe for him it was normal. Maybe he did this kind of thing all the time, bought people, arranged their lives, moved them around like chess pieces. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm trying to figure out what you get from this that's worth all this trouble. I told you, legitimacy. That's not a real answer. Lorenzo finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. No, it's not, but it's the only one you need. The flight took 3 hours. Elena dozed fitfully, her body exhausted from the sleepless night. When she woke, they were descending into bright desert sunlight, the sprawl of Las Vegas spreading out below like a glittering promise of cheap dreams. The chapel was exactly what she expected, tacky, efficient, staffed by people who'd clearly seen it all and were unimpressed by anything. The officiant was a woman in her 60s who wore too much turquoise jewelry and pronounced them husband and wife in less time than it took to order coffee. Lorenzo kissed her. It was brief, perfunctory, his lips barely brushing hers, but something in that moment felt weighted, significant, like she'd crossed a threshold she couldn't uncross. They signed the license. Lorenzo handed the officiant an envelope that was probably full of cash. They walked out into the desert heat as husband and wife, legally bound, and Elena felt nothing except a strange kind of numbness. That's it? She said. That's it. We're married. Lorenzo checked his watch. Plane leaves in an hour. Let's go. The flight back was quieter. Elena couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger, the physical proof of what she'd done. Mrs. Vieri. Mrs. Lorenzo Vieri. It sounded like someone else's name. They landed in New York as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The car was waiting. Lorenzo gave the driver an address Elena didn't recognize. Somewhere uptown, far from her old neighborhood. Where are we going? She asked. Home. The word sent a chill through her. Not her home. His home. The place where she'd be living now, playing house with a dangerous man she'd married for money and survival. The car wound through increasingly expensive neighborhoods until it stopped in front of a building that looked more like a fortress than a residence. Stone facade, discreet entrance, the kind of place that screamed old money and older secrets. The driver opened her door. Lorenzo led her inside without ceremony, past security that nodded at him with the same fearful respect she'd seen on the plane, into an elevator that required a key to operate. They rode to the top floor in silence. The penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, modern furniture that looked expensive and uncomfortable, art on the walls that was probably worth more than Carter textiles. Everything was pristine, cold, perfectly arranged. It looked like a museum, not a home. Your room is down that hall. Second door on the right, Lorenzo said, shrugging off his jacket. My room is the master suite at the end. The kitchen is fully stocked. There's a housekeeper who comes twice a week. She's discreet. Don't worry about her. Any questions? Elena had about 1,000 questions, but she settled on, do you have any rules I should know about? Don't go in my office. Don't answer the door unless I've told you to expect someone. Don't bring anyone here without clearing it with me first. He loosened his tie, looking suddenly tired in a way he hadn't before. And don't mistake what this is. We're married on paper, Elena. That's all. I know. Do you? Lorenzo stepped closer, and she forced herself not to back away. Because I need to be very clear about something. I didn't marry you because I want a relationship. I married you because I need a wife, and you need money. That's the arrangement. If you start expecting more, if you start thinking this is something it's not, we're going to have problems. Understand? Elena lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. I understand perfectly. You bought a transaction, not a person. Trust me, I've learned that lesson already. Something flickered in Lorenzo's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect? Good. Then we'll get along fine. He walked away, disappearing into what she assumed was his bedroom, leaving Elena standing in the middle of a penthouse that cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, wearing a ring that felt like a shackle, married to a man who'd made it very clear she was a means to an end. This was her life now. Elena found her room. It was beautiful, impersonal, like a luxury hotel suite, and set her suitcase on the bed. Through the window, she could see the park, the city lights beginning to sparkle as night fell. Somewhere out there, her father was probably sitting in his study, worrying about the company, about her, about everything. Tomorrow she'd call him. Tomorrow she'd tell him she'd gotten married, that everything was going to be okay, that he could stop worrying. Tomorrow she'd start lying to everyone she loved. But tonight, Elena let herself feel the weight of what she'd done. She'd married a stranger, a criminal, a man who'd looked at her like she was a problem he'd solved, not a person he'd chosen. She'd sold herself for security, and she couldn't even pretend it was noble. It was survival, pure and simple, and it tasted like ash. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Carter Textiles creditors will receive payment confirmation Monday morning. Your father's medical bills are handled. Welcome to the family. Elena stared at the message. This was real. It was happening. Lorenzo had delivered exactly what he promised, which somehow made it worse. She'd expected delays, complications, maybe even betrayal. But he'd been efficient, direct, exactly as advertised. She was married to a man who kept his word, which should have been comforting. It wasn't. Elena changed into pajamas, crawled into the too-soft bed, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged her under. Her last thought before sleep was a question she couldn't answer. What kind of person had she become? Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. For 3 confused seconds, she thought she was back in her apartment, that yesterday had been a fever dream. Then she saw the ring on her finger, heavy and foreign, and reality crashed back. She was married to Lorenzo Vieri, and she was living in his penthouse like some kind of kept woman in a Gothic novel, except the Gothic novels never mentioned how the marble floors were cold against bare feet or how the silence in a place this large felt oppressive. Her phone said it was just past 7. Too early to call her father, but she needed to do it soon before he heard from someone else. The thought made her stomach clench. How exactly did you tell your dying father that you'd married a man he'd never met, in a ceremony he hadn't attended, to a person whose last name carried whispers of violence? Elena showered in a bathroom larger than her old bedroom, using products that probably cost more per ounce than she used to spend on groceries. Everything smelled expensive, bergamot and cedar, scents chosen by someone else for someone else's life. She dressed in jeans and a sweater, armor against the strangeness, and ventured out of her room. The penthouse was quiet. No signs of Lorenzo. No sounds except the hum of expensive appliances and the muted noise of the city far below. Elena found the kitchen, all stainless steel and Italian marble, and discovered that fully stocked meant a refrigerator full of prepared meals in glass containers, each labeled with heating instructions. No cereal boxes, no half-empty jars of peanut butter, none of the normal debris of living. It looked like a showroom. She was heating water for coffee when Lorenzo appeared, dressed for the gym in athletic clothes that shouldn't have looked threatening, but somehow did. He moved like someone trained to hurt people, all controlled power and economy of motion. "You're up early," he said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a protein shake. "Couldn't sleep." "You'll get used to it." He drank half the shake in one go, watching her over the rim. "We need to call your father today. The sooner we control the narrative, the better." Elena's hand tightened on her coffee mug. "I know. Do you need time to prepare what you're going to say?" "I need time to figure out how to lie to him convincingly." Lorenzo set down his shake. "It's not lying. We are married. The circumstances are just simplified." "Simplified," Elena repeated flatly. "Is that what we're calling it? Would you prefer I tell him the truth, that his daughter sold herself to save his company?" Lorenzo's voice was casual, but the words landed like slaps. "I'm sure that would make him feel much better." "You're an asshole." "Yes, but I'm an asshole who's about to save your family's legacy, so maybe save the moral judgments for after I've delivered." He pulled out his phone. "I'll make the call in an hour. That gives you time to get your story straight. We met 6 months ago at a charity gala. You were volunteering, I was donating. We kept it quiet because of your divorce, didn't want the publicity. We fell in love. Use whatever cliches you want for that part. Last week I proposed. Yesterday we eloped because we didn't want to wait. Simple, believable, boring enough that no one looks too close. My father will ask questions. Let him. Just stick to the story." Lorenzo finished his shake and tossed the bottle in recycling with practiced precision. "And Elena, sell it. Whatever you're feeling about this arrangement, about me, bury it. Your father needs to believe you're happy, or this doesn't work." He left before she could respond, disappearing back down the hallway with his phone already at his ear, speaking rapid Italian to someone who wasn't her. Elena stood in the too-perfect kitchen with her too-expensive coffee and tried to figure out how she was going to pull this off. An hour later, she sat on the pristine white sofa while Lorenzo stood by the windows, phone on speaker between them. Her father answered on the third ring. "Elena, it's early, sweetheart. Everything okay?" Hearing his voice made something crack in her chest. "Hi, Dad. Yeah, everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I have news." "News? Did something happen with the company?" "I got a strange call yesterday from the bank saying, 'Dad, I got married.'" Silence. Long enough that Elena wondered if the call had dropped. Then, "You what?" "I got married. Yesterday. I know it's sudden, and I should have told you sooner, but everything happened so fast, and I..." "Married to who?" "Elena, you've been divorced less than a year. What are you..." "His name is Lorenzo Vieri." She watched Lorenzo, who remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable. "We met 6 months ago. I didn't tell you because of the divorce, because I didn't want you to worry, but Dad, he's wonderful, and he loves me, and when he proposed, I just knew I didn't want to wait." More silence. Elena could picture her father in his study, rubbing his temples the way he did when numbers didn't add up. "Vieri, that name sounds familiar." "He's an import-export," Lorenzo said smoothly, taking over the conversation with the ease of someone who'd lied professionally for years. "Mr. Carter, I apologize for the unconventional introduction. I wanted to meet you properly before the wedding, but your daughter is stubborn when she wants something. Who is this? Lorenzo Vieri, your new son-in-law. And before you ask, yes, I'm aware this is unorthodox. But I love your daughter, sir, and I'd very much like to meet you in person to discuss both her future and the future of Carter Textiles. Elena heard her father's sharp intake of breath. What do you know about the company? I know it's in trouble. I know you've been struggling to secure financing, and I know I can help. Lorenzo's voice was calm, confident, the voice of a man used to getting what he wanted. I have resources and connections. With your permission, I'd like to use them. I don't accept charity. It's not charity. It's family. Elena is my wife now. What affects her affects me. What affects you affects her. I take care of what's mine. The possessiveness in that last sentence made Elena's skin prickle, but her father seemed to hear something else. Security, maybe, or old-fashioned values he approved of. I need to meet you, her father said finally. Both of you, today, if possible. Lorenzo looked at Elena, one eyebrow raised. She nodded. We can be there by noon, Lorenzo said. I'm looking forward to it, sir. After they hung up, Elena let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. He's going to hate you. Probably, but he'll accept me because he doesn't have a choice. Lorenzo tucked his phone away. Get dressed, something appropriate for meeting a father-in-law who thinks his daughter made a terrible mistake. Elena stood, anger flashing hot in her chest. You know, you could try being less of a prick about this. Why? You knew what I was when you agreed. Knowing and experiencing are different things. Lorenzo crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. Let me make something very clear. I don't do warm. I don't do gentle. I don't do any of the things you probably want from a husband, even a fake one. What I do is keep my word. I said I'd save your company, and I will. I said I'd protect you, and I will. But I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not just to make you comfortable. If that's a problem, we can end this right now. But and let my father lose everything? Your choice, not mine. They stood there, locked in a contest of wills that Elena knew she'd lose. Lorenzo didn't blink, didn't back down, didn't show any sign that her anger affected him at all. He was immovable, implacable, exactly as advertised. Fine, she said quietly. I'll get dressed. She walked away before he could see how much she wanted to cry. The drive to her father's house in Westchester took 90 minutes, most of it spent in tense silence. Lorenzo made phone calls in Italian, his voice low and sharp, dealing with problems Elena didn't want to understand. She watched the suburbs roll past and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. Her father's house looked smaller than she remembered, the gardens less maintained, paint peeling on the shutters. Evidence of financial strain everywhere, if you knew to look for it. The sedan pulled up the circular drive, and Elena saw her father already standing on the front steps, arms crossed, expression thunderous. Let me do the talking, Lorenzo said quietly, at least at first. He's my father. And he's angry. Angry people make mistakes. I don't. Elena wanted to argue, but the car door was opening and her father was walking toward them with the kind of righteous fury only parents could muster. She climbed out, and he pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. What were you thinking? He said into her hair. Elena, what were you thinking? Dad, I'm okay. I promise. You married a stranger. You didn't even tell me you were seeing anyone. He pulled back, gripping her shoulders, his eyes searching her face for something she wasn't sure she could give him. After Marcus, after everything, how could you... Mr. Carter. Lorenzo had gotten out of the car, moving with that same controlled grace, his hand extended. I understand you're upset. You have every right to be. But I assure you your daughter is safe and cared for. Robert Carter looked at Lorenzo's hand like it might bite him. You're the one who married my daughter without asking my permission. I'm the one your daughter chose to marry. There's a difference. Lorenzo lowered his hand, unbothered by the rejection. May we go inside? I think this conversation deserves privacy. Her father hesitated, then nodded curtly and led them into the house. The interior was the same as Elena remembered. Dark wood, traditional furniture, photos of her mother in every room. It smelled like old books and the cigars her father wasn't supposed to smoke anymore. They settled in the study, her father behind his desk like this was a business negotiation, which Elena supposed it was. Lorenzo sat across from him, completely relaxed, while Elena perched on the arm of a chair, feeling like a child caught between warring parents. "Start talking," her father said, "and it better be good." Lorenzo leaned back, crossing one ankle over his knee. "Your daughter came into my life 6 months ago at the Children's Hospital Charity Gala. She was working the volunteer table. I was there out of obligation, writing a check to feel like I'd contributed something. We started talking. She was different from the women I usually meet, smart, direct, no illusions about who I was or what I did." "And what do you do exactly?" "I facilitate trade, luxury goods primarily. European imports, high-end clients. It's profitable, but not glamorous." The lie came so smoothly that Elena almost believed it herself. "I've built a successful business, Mr. Carter. Successful enough that when Elena told me about Carter Textiles' situation, I had the resources to help. I don't want your money." "Then think of it as an investment. Your company has good bones, good history. With the right capital injection and some modernization, it could be profitable again. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering partnership." Her father's jaw worked. "And my daughter? Where does she fit in this partnership?" "She fits everywhere. She's my wife." Lorenzo's voice softened, just slightly, just enough to sound almost genuine. "I won't claim this was conventional. I won't claim I did everything right. But I love her, and she loves me, and we're building a life together. Isn't that what matters?" Robert Carter looked at Elena, really looked at her, and she knew this was the moment. This was where she either sold the lie or destroyed everything. "Is that true?" her father asked. "Elena, look at me. Is that true?" Elena met his eyes and tried to ignore the guilt clawing at her throat. "Yes, Dad. It's true. I love him." The words tasted like poison, but she said them anyway, and watched her father's expression shift from anger to something more complicated. Relief, maybe, or resignation. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her, because the alternative was that his daughter had made another catastrophic mistake and he couldn't save her. "He treats you well?" her father asked quietly. "He does." That part wasn't entirely a lie. Lorenzo had been cold, blunt, controlling. But he hadn't hurt her, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't threatened, hadn't done any of the things Marcus had normalized. "He's good to me, Dad. I know it's fast. I know it looks crazy. But after Marcus, I needed someone who was different. Lorenzo is different." Her father's shoulders sagged, the fight going out of him. "You're really married." "We are. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I'm sorry you weren't there. But I'm happy, and I need you to be happy for me." Robert Carter stood and walked around the desk, pulling Elena into another hug. "I just want you safe, sweetheart. After your mother, after Marcus, I can't lose you too. You won't, I promise." Over her father's shoulder, Elena caught Lorenzo watching them, his expression unreadable. He'd won. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted. A grieving father convinced his daughter had found safety, a business relationship framed as family loyalty. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like Elena had just lied to the one person who'd never lied to her, and there was no taking it back. Her father pulled away, wiping his eyes quickly, embarrassed by the emotion. All right, if this is what you want, then welcome to the family, I suppose." He extended his hand to Lorenzo, who stood and shook it firmly. "But let me be clear, you hurt her, and I don't care what kind of resources you have. I'll make you regret it." "Understood," Lorenzo said, "and appreciated. A father should protect his daughter." They talked business after that, her father and Lorenzo poring over financial documents that Lorenzo had somehow already prepared, discussing restructuring plans and market strategies with a fluency that surprised Elena. Lorenzo knew the textile industry better than she'd expected, asked smart questions, made observations that had her father nodding in agreement. By the time they left 2 hours later, Robert Carter looked less like a man watching his daughter make a mistake and more like a man who'd found an unexpected ally. In the car, Elena stayed silent until they'd cleared the driveway. Then, "You researched the company?" "Of course I did. How long have you been planning this?" Lorenzo glanced at her. "Planning what?" "This. Me. All of it. You didn't just happen to stop your car that night. You knew who I was, knew about the company, probably knew I'd be desperate enough to say yes." "How long?" "Does it matter?" "Yes. It matters to me." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, watching the road. 3 weeks. I've been watching you for 3 weeks. The confession hit Elena like ice water. You've been stalking me. I've been assessing an investment. There's a difference. No, there really isn't. Her hands curled into fists. You had no right. I had every right to protect my interests. You think I'd marry someone without knowing exactly who they were? Lorenzo's voice was cold, matter of fact. I knew about your divorce, your debts, your father's illness. I knew you were desperate and running out of options. I knew you'd say yes if I timed it right, and I was correct. You manipulated me. I made you an offer. You accepted. That's not manipulation, Elena. That's business. She wanted to scream at him, to demand he take her back to the penthouse so she could pack her things and leave. But she'd already lied to her father, already committed to this path, and walking away now would destroy everything Lorenzo had just promised to save. I hate you, she said quietly. You'll get over it. Lorenzo merged onto the highway, his attention already elsewhere. We have a dinner party tomorrow night. Business associates, their wives, the usual social performance. You'll need something appropriate to wear. There's a boutique that delivers. I'll have them send options this afternoon. I can buy my own clothes. Not the kind you'll need for tomorrow. These events have expectations. He glanced at her. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm trying to prepare you. My world has rules, and breaking them has consequences. Elena stared out the window, watching the city approach. What kind of consequences? The kind where people notice, where they talk, where they start asking questions I don't want asked. His hands tightened on the steering wheel just slightly. You represent me now. How you look, how you act, who you talk to. It all reflects on me. I need you to understand that. So I'm supposed to be your perfect accessory. You're supposed to be my wife. There's a difference, even if you can't see it yet. They didn't speak again until the car pulled up to the penthouse. Elena went straight to her room, closed the door, and stood in the center of the expensive space feeling more trapped than she'd ever felt in her tiny apartment with the broken radiator. At least there, she'd been poor but free. Here, she was comfortable and owned. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. Thank you for introducing me to Lorenzo. He seems like a good man. I'm happy for you, sweetheart. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the message, and wondered how many more lies she'd have to tell before this was over. 18 months. She could survive 18 months of anything, couldn't she? A knock on her door interrupted her spiral. What? Lorenzo opened the door without waiting for permission, holding several garment bags. The boutique delivered early. Try these on. Pick what works. The party starts at 8 tomorrow. We'll leave at 7:30. I didn't say I was going. Yes, you did. When you married me, you agreed to all of this. He laid the garment bags on the bed. And before you argue, remember that your father thinks you're happy, that you chose this. If you want to keep him believing that, you'll show up tomorrow looking like you belong at my side. Elena stood, crossing her arms. You know what's funny? Marcus used to do the same thing. Tell me what to wear, where to go, who to talk to. I thought marrying you would be different. It is different. I'm doing it to protect you, not control you. You really believe that, don't you? Lorenzo stepped closer, and Elena refused to back away even though every instinct screamed at her to maintain distance. What I believe, he said quietly, is that you made a choice. A hard choice. Maybe even a bad choice. But yours. You can resent me for it. You can hate me for it, but you can't pretend you're a victim. You walked into that car knowing exactly what I was offering. I walked into that car because I was desperate, and I gave you a way out of that desperation. You're welcome. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Try the blue dress. It'll look good on you. After he left, Elena unzipped the garment bags with shaking hands. Inside were dresses that probably cost more than she used to make in a month, each one more beautiful and impractical than the last. She pulled out the blue one Lorenzo had mentioned, midnight silk that would cling in all the right places, elegant and dangerous and completely unlike anything she'd worn in years. She held it up to the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. That woman looked like someone who belonged in Lorenzo Vieri's world, someone sophisticated and controlled and utterly fake. Elena hung the dress back up and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd put on the costume, play the role, smile at strangers who probably had blood on their hands. Tomorrow she'd be Mrs. Vieri, devoted wife, perfect accessory. But tonight, she let herself be Elena Carter, broke, desperate, and drowning in choices she couldn't undo. The boutique had also sent shoes, jewelry, even a clutch purse that matched the dress perfectly. Someone had thought of everything, which meant Lorenzo had thought of everything, which meant he'd been planning this performance down to the smallest detail. The realization should have made her angry. Instead, it just made her tired. Elena slept badly again that night, waking every few hours to the unfamiliar silence of the penthouse. At some point past midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Lorenzo, probably, dealing with whatever business kept men like him awake at ungodly hours. She stayed very still, listening to him move through the apartment, and wondered what kind of person could live like this. Always controlled, always performing, never letting anyone see past the careful construction. Maybe that was the real difference between her and Lorenzo. She still had pieces of herself she wanted to protect. He'd given up on protection years ago and built armor instead. Morning came too quickly. Elena forced herself through the motions. Shower, coffee, small talk with Lorenzo over breakfast that felt like a rehearsal for later. He was different today, more present, asking about her father and whether she needed anything before tonight. It would have seemed almost caring if Elena didn't know it was just preparation, making sure his investment was secure. You nervous? He asked, watching her push eggs around her plate. Should I be? These people are... Lorenzo paused, choosing his words carefully. They're not like your father's business associates. They're harder, more cynical. They'll be looking for weakness. And if they find it, they won't. Because you're not weak, Elena. You're scared, maybe, but not weak. There's a difference. He stood, collecting his dishes. The dress fits? I haven't tried it on. Do that, and practice your smile. The real one looks too honest. He left her alone with that disturbing piece of advice, and Elena spent the afternoon trying on dresses and practicing lies in the mirror. The blue dress did look good, too good, the kind of good that felt like warfare. She paired it with heels that made her 3 inches taller and jewelry that probably required its own insurance policy. By the time Lorenzo knocked on her door at 7:15, Elena had transformed into someone she barely recognized. You clean up well, he said, his eyes traveling over her in a way that wasn't quite appreciation, but wasn't quite indifference either. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. He held out his arm. Ready? Elena took his arm, feeling the solid muscle beneath expensive fabric, and let him lead her toward whatever nightmare waited on the other side of this evening. The car ride was mercifully short, pulling up to a building even more exclusive than Lorenzo's, if that was possible. A doorman ushered them inside with deference that bordered on fear. The party was already in full swing, 50 people in a penthouse somehow larger than Lorenzo's, all of them dressed like they bought their clothes by the designer rather than the piece. Elena recognized the type immediately. Old money trying to look new money trying to look old, and predators circling each other with champagne flutes and false smiles. Lorenzo's hand settled on the small of her back, possessive and guiding. Stay close. Smile. Don't answer questions about where we met or how long we've been together. Let me handle that. More lies? More protection, for both of us. They moved through the room like sharks through water, Lorenzo introducing her with practiced ease. This was his world, and he navigated it with the kind of confidence that came from owning everything you touched. Elena smiled until her face hurt, shook hands with people whose names she forgot immediately, and tried not to think about what these people did for a living. Lorenzo! A man approached, older, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen too much and enjoyed most of it. I heard rumors you'd gotten married. Didn't believe them until now. Marcus Torino, my wife Elena. Lorenzo's hand tightened slightly on her back. Elena, Marcus is an old family friend. The way he said family made it clear he didn't mean the kind with Thanksgiving dinners. Elena shook Marcus Torino's hand and tried not to flinch at how cold it was. Lovely to meet you, Torino said, his gaze lingering on her face just long enough to be uncomfortable. Lorenzo, you always did have excellent taste. I do, Lorenzo agreed, his voice carrying a warning Elena didn't understand. Torino laughed, sensing the boundary. Well, congratulations. Marriage is a wonderful institution, assuming you pick the right cell. He winked at Elena like they were sharing a joke. Your husband treating you well? Very well, Elena said, because what else could she say? Good, good. Lorenzo's particular about taking care of his things. The conversation moved on, but the phrasing stayed with Elena. His things. Not his wife, not his partner, but his things, like she was property to be maintained and displayed. Was that how these people saw her? How Lorenzo saw her? The evening stretched on in a blur of introductions and small talk and growing dread. Elena watched Lorenzo work the room, saw how people deferred to him, how even the powerful ones seemed slightly afraid. This was his domain, and she was just visiting, playing dress-up in a world she didn't understand and didn't want to. Around 10, she excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment away from the performance. The powder room was absurdly luxurious, all marble and gold fixtures, and Elena braced her hands on the sink and stared at her reflection. The woman looking back was a stranger, polished, perfect, exactly what Lorenzo had paid for. The door opened and another woman entered, younger than most of the guests, with dark hair and an expression that suggested she saw right through Elena's carefully constructed facade. You're Lorenzo's new wife, the woman said. Not a question. I am. Interesting. I didn't think he'd ever actually do it. She touched up her lipstick, watching Elena in the mirror. I'm Sofia Castellano. My father does business with your husband. Nice to meet you. Is it? Sofia smiled, sharp and knowing. You look terrified. Elena's carefully maintained composure cracked, just slightly. I'm fine. Sure you are? Word of advice? Sofia capped her lipstick. Whatever Lorenzo told you about this life, about how it works, forget half of it. The real rules aren't the ones they tell you. They're the ones you learn by surviving. You don't know what you've gotten into. I can see it on your face. Sofia's expression softened, just marginally. Look, I don't know why Lorenzo married you, and I don't care. But if you're going to make it in this world, you need to learn fast. Trust no one, show no weakness, and never ever forget that everyone here is using everyone else, including your husband. She left before Elena could respond, leaving her alone with words that felt like ice water down her spine. When Elena returned to the party, she found Lorenzo deep in conversation with two men who looked like they'd walked straight out of a crime drama. Their voices were low, intense, and they stopped talking the moment they noticed her approaching. Gentlemen, my wife, Lorenzo said smoothly. Elena, this is Antonio Greco and his associate David Chen. We were just discussing shipping logistics. The lie was so obvious it was almost funny. Elena shook their hands, played her part, and watched Lorenzo perform the same careful dance he'd been doing all night, revealing nothing, controlling everything, keeping her at arm's length, even while keeping her close. By the time they left just after midnight, Elena felt wrung out, exhausted from holding a smile and pretending she belonged. The car ride home was silent until Lorenzo spoke. You did well tonight. Did I? Better than I expected. People believed you. That's what matters. Elena turned to look at him. Sofia Castellano told me not to trust anyone, including you. Lorenzo's expression didn't change. Smart woman, you should take her advice. So I shouldn't trust you. You should trust that I'll keep my word. Beyond that, he shrugged. Trust is expensive, Elena. I wouldn't waste it on me. The words hung in the air between them, stark and honest in a way that made Elena's chest tighten. She wanted to ask what kind of person told you not to trust them. What kind of marriage started with that warning, but Lorenzo had already turned his attention to his phone, dismissing the conversation like it had never happened. Back at the penthouse, Elena kicked off the expensive heels and felt her feet scream in relief. The dress that had felt like armor now felt like a costume she couldn't wait to shed. She was halfway to her room when Lorenzo's voice stopped her. "We need to talk." She turned. He'd loosened his tie, shed his jacket, and somehow that small concession to comfort made him look more dangerous, not less. "About what?" "About what comes next. You handled tonight well, but that was easy. The real test comes in 3 days." "What happens in 3 days?" Lorenzo poured himself a drink, scotch, neat, the kind that costs more than most people's car payments. "Family dinner. My family, not yours. They'll want to meet you, size you up, figure out what angle I'm playing." "And what angle are you playing?" "That's what they'll be trying to determine." He took a slow sip, watching her over the rim of his glass. "My family is complicated. They don't trust outsiders. They especially don't trust sudden marriages to women they've never heard of. So they'll think I'm a plant, a spy or something, or a liability or a distraction, or any number of things that end with them trying to get rid of you." He said it so casually, like discussing the weather. "Which is why you need to understand the dynamics before we walk in there." Elena sank onto the arm of the couch, suddenly too tired to stand. "Tell me." Lorenzo settled into the chair across from her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost hesitant. "My uncle runs the family operations, Salvatore Vieri. He's the one who calls the shots, makes the decisions, decides who's in and who's out. I report to him, ultimately. Everyone does. Even you? Especially me. I'm his nephew, but that doesn't buy loyalty. It just means I have further to fall if I screw up." Lorenzo swirled his drink. "Then there's my cousin, Marco. He's Salvatore's son, and he's been waiting his whole life to take over. My marriage threatens that." "How?" "Because a wife means stability. It means I'm thinking long-term, building something beyond just profit. It makes me look like succession material, and Marco doesn't like competition." Elena processed that. "So your cousin is going to hate me because I make you look good. He's going to hate you because you exist. The rest is just details." Lorenzo finished his drink and set the glass down with a soft click. "There'll be others there too. Associates, hangers-on, people looking for any weakness they can exploit. You need to be perfect, Elena. No cracks, no hesitation, no doubt. They need to believe you're exactly where you want to be. And if they don't believe it, then things get complicated. More complicated than marrying a stranger to save my family's company?" Lorenzo's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Significantly more. The dinner was at Salvatore's estate in Connecticut, which meant another car ride spent in tense silence while Elena tried to remember all the details Lorenzo had drilled into her over the past 3 days. Don't ask questions about business. Don't volunteer information. Don't leave his side unless absolutely necessary. Don't trust anyone, not even people who seemed friendly. Especially not people who seemed friendly. "You look nervous," Lorenzo said as they turned onto a long private drive lined with security cameras. "I am nervous." "Don't be. They can smell fear like sharks smell blood." He glanced at her. "You survived Marcus Hale and a bitter divorce. You survived losing everything and starting over. You can survive one dinner with my family." "Your family sounds significantly more dangerous than my ex-husband." "They are. But unlike your ex-husband, they have rules, codes. As long as you don't break those, you'll be fine." Elena wanted to ask what happened if you did break them, but the car was pulling up to a house that looked more like a fortress. Stone walls, iron gates, men in suits stationed at intervals that suggested security, not staff. Lorenzo helped her out of the car, his hand warm and steady on hers, and she realized this was the first time he'd voluntarily touched her since their staged kiss at the wedding chapel. "Ready?" he asked. "No." "Good answer. Neither am I." The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that could cut glass. She looked Lorenzo up and down, then turned that dissecting gaze on Elena. "So this is the mysterious wife," the woman said. Her accent was thicker than Lorenzo's, old world in a way that suggested she'd been born somewhere else and never quite left it behind. "Lorenzo, you didn't mention she was so young." "Aunt Carlotta." Lorenzo bent to kiss her cheek. "Elena, this is my uncle's wife. She runs the household." "Among other things," Carlotta said dryly. She held out her hand to Elena, and when Elena took it, Carlotta's grip was surprisingly strong. "Welcome to the family, child. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself into." "I'm beginning to," Elena said, because honesty seemed safer than lies with this woman. Carlotta's expression shifted. Not quite approval, but something close. Come. Everyone's waiting." The interior of the house was exactly what Elena expected. Old money trying to look older, with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors and furniture that probably predated the Revolutionary War. They walked through hallways that felt more like museums until they reached a dining room where a long table was set for at least 20 people. Most of the seats were already occupied. At the head of the table sat a man who could only be Salvatore Vieri, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, with Lorenzo's dark eyes and none of his careful control. He looked like someone who'd built an empire with his bare hands and wasn't ashamed of the blood it had taken. "Lorenzo!" Salvatore's voice boomed across the room. "Finally! We were beginning to think you'd run off with your new bride and forgotten about us." "Never, Uncle." Lorenzo guided Elena forward with a hand on her back. "Elena, my Uncle Salvatore. Uncle, my wife Elena." Salvatore stood, which made everyone else at the table stand too, a ripple effect of respect that was almost choreographed. He walked around the table and stopped in front of Elena, studying her with an intensity that made her want to step back. She held her ground. "So you're the one who caught my nephew," Salvatore said. "Must be something special about you. Lorenzo doesn't do anything without calculating every angle first." "I'm not sure I caught him," Elena said. "I think it was more of a mutual agreement." Salvatore laughed, a big, genuine sound that seemed to surprise everyone in the room. "She's got spine. I like that. Too many women these days, they fold the minute you look at them hard. Not this one." He clapped Lorenzo on the shoulder. "You chose well, nephew. For once." Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but Elena felt him relax fractionally beside her. "Thank you, Uncle." They took their seats, Lorenzo next to his uncle, Elena beside Lorenzo, directly across from a man who had to be Marco. He was younger than Lorenzo, maybe 30, with the kind of pretty boy looks that probably got him whatever he wanted until someone hit him. The smile he gave Elena was all teeth and no warmth. "Welcome to the family," Marco said. "I'm sure Lorenzo's told you all about us." "Some," Elena said carefully. "I'm sure he has. My cousin's very thorough. Likes to control every variable, know every outcome before he makes a move." Marco sipped his wine. "Makes you wonder what outcome he was looking for when he married you." "Marco?" Salvatore's voice cracked like a whip. "Manners." "Just making conversation, Papa." But Marco sat back, still smiling that sharp smile, and Elena understood that the knives were already out. Dinner was served, course after course of Italian food that was probably incredible, but tasted like ash in Elena's mouth. She smiled, made small talk with the women seated near her, and tried not to think about the fact that everyone at this table probably knew exactly what Lorenzo did for a living and had made peace with it, or participated in it, or both. Across from her, Marco kept up a running commentary of barely veiled insults disguised as family stories. Lorenzo had been reckless as a teenager. Lorenzo had made bad business decisions in his 20s. Lorenzo had a tendency to overthink everything, which was why he'd never been married before, too busy calculating risk to actually take any. "But I suppose that changed," Marco said, gesturing at Elena with his wine glass. "What was it about her that made you finally take the leap, cousin? The eyes? The smile? Or was it something more practical?" Lorenzo's hand found Elena's under the table, squeezing once, a warning or a comfort, she couldn't tell. "It was everything," he said evenly. "Some things can't be calculated, Marco. Some things you just know." "How romantic!" Marco's smile widened. Tell me, Elena, how did you two meet? Lorenzo's been very secretive about the whole thing. This was the test, Elena realized. Marco wasn't asking because he cared. He was asking because he wanted to see if their story held up under scrutiny, if she'd stumble over details or contradict something Lorenzo had said. A charity gala, Elena said, repeating the lie they'd practiced. 6 months ago. I was volunteering. He was there on business. We started talking, and she shrugged, aiming for casual. Sometimes you just connect with someone, you know? 6 months is a long time to keep a relationship secret, Marco observed, especially in our circles. People talk. We were careful, Lorenzo said. Elena was going through a divorce. I wanted to protect her privacy. How considerate. Marco leaned back, still watching Elena like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. And you didn't think it was strange, Elena, that a man like my cousin wanted to marry you so quickly? Didn't question what he might be getting out of the arrangement? That's enough. Salvatore's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Marco, you're being rude to our guest. I'm just asking questions, Papa, trying to get to know my new cousin-in-law. You're being an ass and everyone knows it. Salvatore turned to Elena, his expression softening. You'll have to forgive my son. He forgets his manners when he drinks. Lorenzo, why don't you show Elena the gardens? Give her a break from this circus. Lorenzo stood immediately, helping Elena from her chair. Good idea. We'll be back for dessert. They walked through French doors onto a terrace that overlooked ground so perfectly manicured they looked artificial. The air was cold, sharp with the promise of winter, and Elena wrapped her arms around herself. That was worse than I expected, Lorenzo said quietly. Is it always like that? Marco's always like that. He's been trying to undermine me since we were kids. Lorenzo loosened his tie, staring out at the dark gardens. He's also not wrong. Our marriage is convenient, calculated, everything he accused me of. So why defend it? Because it's nobody's business but ours. He turned to face her. Look, I know this is hard. I know you're way out of your depth here, and I know my family is exactly the kind of people you were raised to avoid. But you're doing fine. Better than fine. You held your ground in there. Elena laughed, a short, bitter sound. I lied to your uncle. To all of them. I sat at that table and smiled while your cousin tried to tear me apart with politeness, and the whole time I was thinking about how I'm the biggest fraud in that room. You're not a fraud. You're playing a role, same as everyone else. That doesn't make it better. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, then reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture so unexpected and gentle that Elena froze. You want to know the truth? He said. You're the only honest person in that room. Everyone else has been lying so long they've forgotten what truth looks like. But you still feel guilty about it. That's not fraud, Elena. That's humanity. She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process Lorenzo Vieri, cold, calculating criminal, saying something that sounded almost kind. Before she could respond, the French doors opened again and Carlotta appeared. Lorenzo, your uncle wants you inside. Business. Her gaze flicked to Elena. You come with me, child. The men will be talking for a while, and you don't want to be standing out here in the cold. Lorenzo squeezed Elena's hand once, then disappeared back inside. Carlotta watched him go, then turned that sharp gaze on Elena. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Elena followed Carlotta down a path that wound through the gardens, gravel crunching under their feet. They walked in silence until they were far enough from the house that voices wouldn't carry. You're not what I expected, Carlotta said finally. What did you expect? Someone harder, more calculating. Lorenzo doesn't do anything without a reason, so when he married you... Carlotta shrugged. I thought you must be playing an angle, but watching you tonight, I don't think you are. I think you're exactly what you appear to be, a young woman who got in over her head and doesn't know how to swim yet. Elena's throat tightened. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's been watching this family for 40 years. To the men in there? No. They see what they want to see, another acquisition, another asset. But I see a girl who's terrified and trying very hard to hide it. They reached a fountain, water trickling despite the cold. Carlotta sat on the edge, patting the stone beside her. Elena sat. Let me tell you something about this family, Carlotta said. The men, they think they run everything. They make the decisions, move the money, decide who lives and who doesn't. But the women? We survive them. We outlive them. We raise their children and bury their bodies and keep the family going when they're too stupid or too dead to do it themselves. You understand what I'm saying? I think so. You're Lorenzo's wife now. That means you're family, whether Marco likes it or not, whether Salvatore trusts you or not. And family looks out for family. Carlotta pulled a card from her pocket and pressed it into Elena's hand. That's my private number. You call me if anything happens. If Lorenzo gets himself into trouble he can't get out of. If someone threatens you. If you need help and don't know where else to turn. You call me. Elena stared at the card. Why would you help me? Because I see something in you that reminds me of myself 40 years ago. And because Lorenzo chose you, which means either he sees something worth protecting or he's made a mistake. Either way, you'll need someone in your corner who isn't a man. Carlotta stood, smoothing her dress. Come. We should get back before they start wondering where we went. They returned to find the men gathered in what Salvatore called his study, a room full of leather and dark wood and cigar smoke despite the no-smoking laws. Lorenzo looked up when Elena entered, something tense in his shoulders relaxing when he saw her. Everything all right? He asked quietly. Fine. Your aunt gave me a tour of the gardens. He didn't look convinced, but Salvatore was already talking again, pulling Lorenzo back into whatever conversation was happening. Elena found a seat near the door, trying to be invisible, while the men discussed shipping routes and payment schedules and other things that sounded almost legitimate but probably weren't. Marco appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of wine. He offered her one. Peace offering, he said. I was an ass at dinner. Elena took the glass but didn't drink. You were. It's nothing personal. I just need to make sure you're not here to hurt my family. I'm not here to hurt anyone. That's what they all say. Marco sipped his wine, watching the men. You know what Lorenzo does, right? What all of this is? I know enough. Do you? Do you know how many people he's hurt, how many lives he's ruined? Marco's voice was low, almost gentle. My cousin's good at making things look clean, legitimate. But there's blood on his hands, Elena. A lot of it. And now there's going to be blood on yours too, just by association. Elena's fingers tightened on the glass. Why are you telling me this? Because you seem like a nice person. And nice people don't last long in this world. They either break or they become something else, something harder. He smiled, sad and strange. I'm just trying to figure out which one you'll be. Before Elena could respond, Lorenzo was there, his hand finding her elbow. We should go. It's late. Running away already? Marco asked. Going home. There's a difference. Lorenzo's voice was cold, final. Uncle, thank you for dinner. We'll see you next month at the, Actually, Lorenzo, one more thing. Salvatore stood, and the room went quiet. I need you in Chicago next week. The situation with the Castellano family is getting complicated, and I need someone I trust to handle it. Elena felt Lorenzo tense beside her. How long? 3, maybe 4 days. Take Elena if you want. Make it a trip. Show her the city. Salvatore's tone made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. Unless she'd rather stay here, which is also fine. She'll come with me, Lorenzo said immediately. Too quickly, Elena thought. Like the idea of leaving her here alone scared him more than bringing her into whatever Chicago business was. They left shortly after, Elena's head spinning from wine and revelations and the weight of Marco's warnings. The car ride back was silent until they hit the highway. My cousin talked to you, Lorenzo said. Not a question. He did. What did he say? Elena looked at him, at the sharp profile illuminated by passing headlights. He said there's blood on your hands, that I'm complicit now just by being your wife. Is that true? Lorenzo was quiet for so long, Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, yes, it's true. I've done things, hurt people, made decisions that ruined lives. And you are complicit, whether you want to be or not. That's what marriage to me means. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked, and because you deserve to know what you're part of. He glanced at her. Does it change anything? Did it? Elena thought about her father, about Carter Textiles, about the fact that she'd already sold herself for security and couldn't unsell herself now. No, she said finally. I knew what you were when I married you. I just didn't want to think about the specifics. And now? Now I don't have a choice, so I guess I'll just have to live with it. The admission hung between them, stark and honest, and Elena realized something had shifted. They weren't pretending anymore, not with each other, at least. Whatever this marriage was, it was built on brutal truths instead of pretty lies, and somehow that felt more stable than anything she'd had with Marcus. When they got back to the penthouse, Elena went straight to her room and changed into pajamas, exhausted down to her bones. She was about to turn off the light when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You did well tonight, but watch Marco. He's dangerous when he feels threatened. See Carlotta. Elena saved the number and typed back a quick thank you, then lay in the dark thinking about blood and complicity and the fact that she was now part of something she'd never be able to fully escape. A knock on her door startled her upright. Yeah? Lorenzo opened the door, still dressed but with his tie gone and his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. Can't sleep? Not really. You? Never could after family dinners. He leaned against the doorframe. About Chicago. You don't have to come if you don't want to. I can make an excuse. Your uncle said I should come. My uncle says a lot of things. Doesn't mean you have to do them. Lorenzo ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger, less dangerous. Look, Chicago is going to be complicated. There are people there who won't be as polite as Marco, who won't pretend to welcome you. If you come, you need to understand it's going to be worse than tonight. But you want me to come, Elena said, reading between the lines. I want you safe, which means keeping you where I can see you. So I'm not safe here alone? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Let's just say my family has a way of testing boundaries when I'm not around. Better you come with me. Elena pulled her knees to her chest, thinking. Chicago meant more lies, more dangerous people, more situations she didn't understand. But it also meant not being alone in this penthouse, not being vulnerable to whatever Marco or anyone else might do while Lorenzo was gone. Okay, she said. I'll come. Something that might have been relief crossed Lorenzo's face. Okay. We leave Tuesday morning. Pack for cold weather. Chicago in November is brutal. He turned to leave, then paused. Elena, thank you. For tonight. For all of it. I know it wasn't easy. None of this is easy. No, he agreed. But you're handling it anyway. That takes strength. After he left, Elena sat in the dark and tried to figure out when exactly she'd stopped hating Lorenzo Vieri and started... what? Not trusting him, exactly, but maybe understanding him. Seeing past the cold exterior to whatever was underneath, something harder and more complicated than she'd expected. The next few days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Lorenzo was gone most of the time, handling business he didn't explain. Elena spent her days exploring the city, meeting with her father to discuss the company's restructuring, and trying not to think too hard about what her life had become. The creditors were backing off, just like Lorenzo promised. Carter Textiles was stabilizing, orders coming in, the factory humming back to life. Her father looked 10 years younger, the stress lines around his eyes easing for the first time since her mother's death. I don't know what I did to deserve you and Lorenzo, her father said over lunch in his study, documents spread between them. But I'm grateful. The company's going to survive, sweetheart, because of you. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. It's not because of me, Dad. It's because of Lorenzo. It's because you found someone who cares about you enough to care about what matters to you. That's everything, Elena. He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I know the divorce was hard. I know Marcus broke something in you. But seeing you with Lorenzo, seeing how he looks at you, gives me hope that you're going to be okay. Elena wanted to scream that it was all fake, that Lorenzo didn't love her, that everything her father believed was a carefully constructed lie. Instead, she smiled and said, I'm going to be fine, Dad. We both are. When she got back to the penthouse that evening, she found Lorenzo in his office, the one room he'd told her was off limits. The door was open, and he was on the phone speaking rapid Italian, his free hand pressed against his temple like he had a headache. He looked exhausted, worn down in a way she'd never seen. She must have made a noise because he looked up, saw her, and ended the call abruptly. "Sorry," Elena said. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't. I was just finishing." He stood, stretching like his back hurt. "How's your father?" "Good. Happy. The company's doing well." "Good." Lorenzo walked over to the window, staring out at the city. "I kept my end of the bargain." "You did. So why do you look so miserable?" The question surprised her. Elena leaned against the doorframe, studying him. "Because lying to my father makes me feel like garbage. Because every time he thanks me for finding you, I want to tell him the truth and watch his world fall apart. Because this whole thing is built on deception, and I'm not sure I'm strong enough to keep it up for 18 months. Lorenzo turned to face her. "You are. Strong enough, I mean. Stronger than you think." "How would you know?" "Because weak people break under pressure. You're still standing." He crossed the room, stopping close enough that Elena could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Chicago's going to test that strength. I need to know you're ready." "I already said I'd come." "I know, but saying and doing are different things." Lorenzo's gaze held hers. "When we're in Chicago, you're going to see things that might scare you, hear things that might make you question whether you made the right choice marrying me. And you're going to have to smile through all of it and pretend it's normal. Can you do that?" Elena thought about the family dinner, about Marco's warnings, about blood and complicity and the price of survival. "I don't know, but I guess we'll find out." Lorenzo's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's the most honest answer you've ever given me. I'm trying this new thing where I stop lying to myself. Thought I'd start with the small stuff." This time he did smile, brief and genuine. "Small stuff, right, like marrying a criminal and joining his family business." "Exactly. Baby steps." The moment hung between them, strange and almost comfortable, until Lorenzo's phone rang again and the walls came back up. He answered in Italian, his expression closing off, and Elena left him to his secrets. Tuesday morning came too fast. Elena packed for Chicago the way she'd packed for Vegas, minimal clothes, maximum anxiety, and tried to prepare herself for whatever was coming. Lorenzo had been tense all morning, making phone calls and checking details with the kind of obsessive precision that suggested this trip was more important than he'd let on. The flight was on a commercial airline this time, first class but not private, which surprised Elena. Lorenzo explained that sometimes being invisible was better than being noticed, and private jets attracted attention they didn't need. They sat side by side in silence, Lorenzo working through documents while Elena stared out the window and tried to imagine what Chicago would bring. They landed in late afternoon, the sky already graying with winter clouds. A car was waiting, black sedan, tinted windows, driver who nodded at Lorenzo with the same fearful respect Elena had seen everywhere else. Chicago looked like New York's colder, windier cousin, all steel and glass and people hurrying against the brutal lake wind. The hotel was downtown, expensive in an understated way that suggested mob money rather than old money. Lorenzo checked them in under his real name, no hiding here apparently, and they rode the elevator to a suite on the top floor. "We have dinner tonight with the Castellanos," Lorenzo said, unlocking the door. "Remember Sophia from the party? The one who told me not to trust anyone?" "That's her. Her father, Carlo, runs operations here. He and my uncle have been partners for 30 years, but recently there's been friction. My job is to smooth things over, find out what's causing the problem, fix it before it becomes a war." Elena set down her suitcase. "And my job?" "Be charming, be observant. Tell me afterward if you notice anything strange." "Strange how?" "Strange like people being too friendly or too hostile, like conversations that stop when you enter the room. Like anyone asking questions about our marriage or my uncle or what I'm doing in Chicago." Lorenzo was unpacking as he talked, hanging suits with military precision. The Castellanos are good people mostly, but good people do bad things when they're scared, and something's gotten them scared enough to risk an alliance that's kept both families profitable for decades. So we're walking into a powder keg. More or less, he checked his watch. We have 3 hours. Get some rest, then get ready. And Elena? Yeah? Don't drink too much tonight. I need you sharp. The dinner was at a restaurant that probably wasn't in any guidebooks. The kind of place where they didn't ask for your name because they already knew who you were. Carlo Castellano was waiting when they arrived. A man in his 50s with graying temples and eyes that had seen enough violence to last several lifetimes. Sofia sat beside him, dressed in black and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Lorenzo. Carlo stood, embracing Lorenzo like family. It's been too long, and this must be the wife I've heard so much about. Elena? Lorenzo said. My wife. Elena, Carlo Castellano, and his daughter Sofia. We've met, Sofia said, giving Elena a tight smile. At the Torino party. How are you adjusting to married life? Still adjusting, Elena admitted. That's honest. I like honest. Sofia gestured to the seat beside her. Sit. Let the men talk business while we discuss more interesting things. The evening split along predictable lines, Lorenzo and Carlo deep in conversation about shipping routes and payment schedules, while Sofia asked Elena pointed questions about how she was really doing, whether Lorenzo was treating her well, whether she understood what she'd married into. He's been decent, Elena said carefully. Better than I expected. That's not saying much. What did you expect? Honestly, I don't know. A monster, maybe. Or at least someone who didn't care whether I lived or died as long as I played my part. Sofia studied her, then leaned closer. Can I give you some advice? Everyone in your world seems very eager to give me advice. That's because you look like someone who desperately needs it. Sofia glanced at their husbands. Not husbands in her case, Elena realized, just her father. Lorenzo's not a monster, but he's also not safe. And the worst part is that he'll make you feel safe right up until the moment he can't protect you anymore. Don't mistake his care for something it's not. What is it then? Possession, control, the same thing men in this world always want. Sofia sipped her wine. Just remember, you're not his partner, Elena. You're his investment. The moment you stop being profitable, the protection stops too. The words echoed what Marco had said, what half a dozen people had implied, and Elena was starting to wonder if everyone was wrong, or if she was the one who didn't understand what she'd gotten into. Dinner ended with handshakes and promises to talk more tomorrow. Lorenzo was quiet on the drive back to the hotel, his jaw tight, and Elena knew something had gone wrong, even if she couldn't pinpoint what. Did you get what you needed? She asked. No, Carlo's hiding something. Lorenzo loosened his tie, frustrated. He's scared of something, and he won't tell me what, which means either he doesn't trust me or he thinks I'm part of the problem. Are you? That's the question, isn't it? He looked at her. Did Sofia say anything useful? Elena hesitated, then decided honesty was less dangerous than half-truths. She said, you'll protect me until I stop being profitable, that I'm an investment, not a partner. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. That's what she thinks? That's what everyone thinks. And you? What do you think? Elena looked at him, really looked at him, past the expensive suit and the careful control, trying to see what was underneath. I think you're more complicated than people give you credit for, but I also think everyone might be right. I don't know yet. Fair enough. Lorenzo turned back to the window. At least you're honest about it. Back at the suite, Elena changed into pajamas and was about to turn in when she heard raised voices from the living room. She cracked open her door and listened. Lorenzo was on the phone, speaking Italian too fast for Elena to catch more than scattered words. But his tone was clear, angry, frustrated, barely controlled. Someone had done something he didn't like, or hadn't done something he'd ordered, and he was making sure they understood the consequences. When he finally hung up, Elena heard him pour a drink, then another. She should go back to bed, give him privacy. Instead, she found herself walking into the living room. Lorenzo stood by the window, glass in hand, staring out at Chicago's lights. He looked older suddenly, worn down by whatever weight he carried. "Trouble?" Elena asked. "Always." He didn't turn around. "You should be asleep." "So should you." "Can't. Too much to think about." He finally looked at her, and something in his expression was different, less guarded, more human. "You ever feel like you're one mistake away from everything falling apart?" The question surprised her. "Every day since I married you." Lorenzo laughed, short, bitter. "At least you're honest about it." He drained his glass. "Go to bed, Elena. Tomorrow's going to be worse than today, and you'll need your strength." "What happens tomorrow?" "I meet with Carlo again. Without you this time. And I find out what he's hiding before it gets us all killed." On seeing. The casual way he said it, "gets us all killed," sent ice through Elena's veins. "Lorenzo, go to bed." It wasn't a request. Elena went, but she didn't sleep. She lay in the dark thinking about blood and complicity and the fact that somewhere in Chicago something dangerous was brewing, and she was right in the middle of it whether she liked it or not. Morning came with Elena still awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to Chicago wake up outside the hotel windows. She heard Lorenzo moving around in the suite's living area around 6, the quiet sounds of someone who didn't want to disturb anyone but couldn't stay still. By 7, she gave up on sleep and emerged to find him already dressed, coffee in hand, looking at his phone with an expression that suggested whatever messages he was reading weren't good. "You look like hell," he said without looking up. "Didn't sleep." "Neither did I." He finally glanced at her, took in the shadows under her eyes. There's coffee. You should eat something too. We're going out in an hour." "I thought you were meeting Carlo alone." "I was. Plans changed." Lorenzo set his phone down, rubbed his eyes. "Sophia called me at 5 this morning, said her father wants to meet with both of us, somewhere public, somewhere safe. That means he's more scared than I thought." Elena poured coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "Scared of what?" "That's what I need to find out." He stood, walked to the window. "When we get there, let me do the talking, but pay attention to everything, who's watching us, who's too interested, who's trying too hard not to look interested. Can you do that?" "I can try." "That'll have to be good enough." They met the Castellanos at a cafe in Little Italy, the kind of place where old men played chess and argued in Italian while their wives gossiped over espresso. Carlo and Sophia were already there, seated at a corner table with clear sightlines to all the exits. Elena noticed that detail and wondered when she'd started thinking like someone in Lorenzo's world. Carlo looked worse than he had last night, older, more haggard, like he'd aged a decade overnight. Sophia sat beside him with her hand on his arm, protective in a way that made Elena's chest ache. "Thank you for coming," Carlo said as they sat down. His voice was rough, strained. "I know this is irregular." "You sounded worried on the phone," Lorenzo said. "What's going on?" Carlo glanced around the cafe, then leaned forward. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Can you do that?" "Depends on the question." "Did Salvatore send you here to kill me?" The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Elena felt her breath catch, felt Lorenzo go very still beside her. Sophia's hand tightened on her father's arm. "No," Lorenzo said quietly. "He sent me here to find out why our partnership is falling apart. That's all." "You swear it?" "On my life." "Carlo, what the hell is going on? Why would you think—" "Because someone's been sending me messages. Photos of my house, my office, Sophia's apartment, always with the same note. Salvatore sends his regards. Sparish says. Carlo pulled out his phone, showed Lorenzo a series of images that made Elena's stomach turn. 3 weeks of this, escalating. Yesterday they sent a photo of Sophia at her gym with a red X over her face. Lorenzo's expression went cold in a way Elena had never seen before. "Show me everything." Carlo slid his phone across the table. Lorenzo scrolled through the messages, his jaw working, and Elena could see rage building behind his careful control. This isn't Salvatore's style. He'd just call you, tell you there was a problem, handle it directly. He wouldn't play games like this. Then who? Someone who wants us to go to war with each other. Someone who benefits if the alliance falls apart. Lorenzo looked at Sofia. Has anyone approached you recently? Offered you deals? Asked questions about your father's business? Marcus Torino, Sofia said immediately. He's been calling, wanting to meet. Said he had an opportunity that would interest my father. Torino. Lorenzo said the name like a curse. He was at the party where I introduced Elena. He's been trying to expand into Chicago for years, but he can't as long as we have the territory locked down. If he can turn you against Salvatore, then the alliance collapses and he moves in to fill the vacuum, Carlo finished. That son of a bitch. We need proof, Lorenzo said. Right now it's just theory. Carlo, I need you to meet with Torino. Tell him you're interested in whatever he's offering. Wear a wire, get him talking, see if he admits to the threats. And if he does? Lorenzo's smile was sharp and cold. Then I handle it, personally. Elena watched this conversation happen and felt like she was watching a foreign film without subtitles. These people were discussing surveillance and violence like it was normal business, and nobody seemed troubled by any of it except her. Elena, Sofia's voice cut through her thoughts. You're very quiet. I don't have anything useful to contribute. That's not true. You're seeing all this fresh, without our biases. Does anything about this seem off to you? Everyone was looking at her now. Elena swallowed hard, forcing herself to think past the fear. The photos, she said slowly, they're all taken during the day, right? In public places where there are lots of people? Carlo nodded. So? So whoever's taking them isn't trying to hide. They want you to know you're being watched. That's not reconnaissance, that's intimidation. They're trying to scare you into making a mistake. Lorenzo looked at her with something that might have been respect. She's right. This whole thing is theater. Torino wants you paranoid enough to act without thinking, desperate enough to take whatever deal he's offering. Which means we need to turn the tables, Sofia said. Make him think it's working while we gather evidence. They spent the next hour planning, Carlo and Lorenzo working out details while Sofia and Elena sat in careful silence. Elena watched Lorenzo operate and saw a different side of him, strategic, precise, but also protective of Carlo in a way that seemed genuine. He cared about this alliance, about these people, even if he'd never admit it. Finally, Carlo stood, embracing Lorenzo. Thank you for believing me, for not assuming Salvatore sent you to clean up a problem. Your family, Lorenzo said simply. That means something. After they left, Lorenzo steered Elena toward the waterfront, walking in silence until they found a bench overlooking the lake. The wind was brutal, cutting through Elena's coat like it wasn't there, but Lorenzo seemed not to notice. You did good back there, he said. I barely said anything. You said the right thing. That's worth more than saying a lot of wrong things. He was quiet for a moment, watching the water. This is what my life looks like, Elena. Threats and counter-threats, alliances that shift like sand, people trying to kill each other over territory and pride. You sure you want to be part of it? I'm already part of it. I don't think I get to back out now. You could. I could arrange it. Divorce, settlement, protection. You'd be set for life. Elena looked at him. Is that what you want? I'm asking what you want. It was a fair question, and Elena didn't have a good answer. What did she want? A few weeks ago, she would have said safety, security, enough money to save her father's company. She had all that now. But somewhere along the way, things had gotten complicated. She'd started to see Lorenzo as more than just a transaction, started to understand the weight he carried, the impossible choices he made daily. I want to see this through, she said finally. Whatever this is. I made a commitment, and I'm not walking away from it. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both? He almost smiled. Yeah, I guess it can. They stayed there until the cold became unbearable, then walked back to the hotel in silence that felt less hostile than it used to. Elena was learning to read Lorenzo's moods, the subtle shifts in his expression that meant he was thinking, planning, calculating odds. Right now he looked worried, which scared her more than anything else. If Lorenzo Vieri was worried, things must be very bad. That night, Elena lay in bed listening to Lorenzo make phone calls in Italian, his voice low and urgent. She caught Salvatore's name several times, Torino's too, and words that sounded like warnings. Whatever was happening in Chicago was bigger than a simple alliance dispute. It was something that could get people killed, including them. She must have dozed off eventually because she woke to silence and darkness and the feeling that something was wrong. The suite was too quiet. Elena slipped out of bed, padding into the living room, and found it empty. Lorenzo's bedroom door was open, his bed untouched. He was gone. Panic hit immediately. Elena checked her phone. Nothing. Checked the bathroom, the hallway outside, came back to the suite, and tried to think rationally. Maybe he'd gone to meet Carlo. Maybe this was normal. Maybe she was overreacting. Then she saw the note on the kitchen counter, Lorenzo's sharp handwriting. Stay inside. Lock the door. Don't answer for anyone but me. Elena's hands shook as she locked the deadbolt, the chain, everything. She tried calling Lorenzo, but it went straight to voicemail. Tried texting, nothing. She was alone in a hotel in Chicago with no idea what was happening, or if Lorenzo was safe, or if someone was coming for her next. The hours crawled by. Elena sat on the couch with all the lights on, jumping at every sound. At some point, she must have fallen asleep because she woke to pounding on the door and Lorenzo's voice saying her name. She fumbled with the locks, threw the door open, and found Lorenzo standing there with blood on his shirt and a cut above his eyebrow that was still bleeding. What happened? Elena grabbed his arm, pulling him inside. Are you hurt? Should I call? I'm fine, it's not my blood. Lorenzo let her guide him to the bathroom, sat on the edge of the tub while she dampened a towel. Most of it's not my blood, anyway. Most of it? Elena pressed the towel to his forehead, trying to stop the bleeding. Lorenzo, what the hell happened? Torino moved faster than I expected. Sent people to Carlo's house tonight. If I hadn't been there... He stopped, jaw tight. They're dead now. Carlo's safe. But this is officially a war. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the towel. You killed them. I did what I had to do to protect my family. Lorenzo caught her wrist, held it steady. I told you this was what my life looked like. This is the reality, Elena. Blood and violence and impossible choices. If you can't handle that, you need to leave now. I'm not leaving. Then you need to understand something. He stood, towering over her in the small bathroom. This gets worse from here. Torino's going to retaliate. He's going to come after everyone I care about, which means he's going to come after you. I can protect you, but only if you do exactly what I say. No questions, no hesitation. Can you do that? Elena looked at the blood on his shirt, the cut on his face, the cold fury in his eyes. She should be terrified, should be running. Instead, she found herself nodding. Yes, I can do that. Good. Lorenzo turned on the shower. I need to clean up, then we're leaving. Pack everything. We're going back to New York tonight. What about Carlo? He's coming with us, so is Sofia. Salvatore is sending people to handle the Chicago situation, but I'm getting you somewhere safe first. Elena left him to shower and packed with hands that still trembled. This was real. The violence, the danger, all of it was real, and she was in the middle of it. She'd married Lorenzo knowing what he was, but knowing and experiencing were completely different things. By the time Lorenzo emerged, dressed in clean clothes with the cut on his forehead butterfly bandaged, Elena had both their bags by the door. He looked at her, surprised. You're fast. You said we were leaving. I'm ready. Something shifted in his expression, respect, maybe, or the beginning of trust. Let's go. The ride to the airport was tense. Elena sandwiched between Lorenzo and Sofia in the back of an armored car while Carlo rode up front with the driver. Nobody spoke. Sofia held her father's hand over the seat, and Elena saw tears on her face that she was trying to hide. At the airport, Salvatore's private jet was waiting. Lorenzo hustled them all aboard, his phone constantly ringing with calls he answered in clipped Italian. Elena strapped in next to Sofia, who finally broke her silence. Thank you, Sofia said quietly. For what? For not falling apart. For staying calm. My father needs that right now. Seeing that Lorenzo's wife can handle this means maybe the alliance isn't as fragile as it looks. Elena wanted to laugh at the irony. She wasn't handling anything. She was barely keeping it together, surviving moment to moment, pretending she was fine when really she wanted to scream. "I'm terrified," Elena admitted. "Good. That means you're not stupid." Sophia wiped her eyes. "But you're still here, which means you're braver than you think." The flight back to New York felt endless. Carlo slept fitfully, exhausted from adrenaline crash. Sophia stared out the window. Lorenzo made phone calls, coordinated with Salvatore, arranged protection for everyone, and Elena sat in the expensive leather seat and tried to process what her life had become. When they finally landed, dawn was breaking over New York. Salvatore was waiting at the airfield with enough security to start a small war, pulling Carlo into an embrace that looked genuinely relieved. "You're safe," Salvatore said. "That's what matters." "Thanks to your nephew." Carlo clapped Lorenzo on the shoulder. "He saved my life, saved Sophia's too." Salvatore looked at Lorenzo with something Elena couldn't quite read, pride maybe, or assessment. "You did well, as always." Then his gaze shifted to Elena. "And you, young lady, I hear you spotted something my nephew missed." Elena's throat was dry. "Just an observation?" "An important one. Lorenzo, you married a smart woman. Don't screw it up." Salvatore turned back to Carlo. "Come, let's get you somewhere secure. We have a lot to discuss." They left in a convoy of black cars, headed to Salvatore's estate. Elena and Lorenzo ended up back at the penthouse, alone for the first time since Chicago. The silence felt heavy, loaded with things neither of them knew how to say. Lorenzo headed straight for his room, started stripping off his jacket. Elena followed, standing in the doorway. "You killed people tonight," she said. "I did." "How many?" Lorenzo turned to look at her. "Does it matter?" "I don't know. Maybe." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "I keep thinking about what Sophia said, about blood on your hands. And I thought I understood what that meant, but I didn't. Not really. Not until tonight. And now that you do understand, I'm still here." She didn't know why she said it, didn't know what she was trying to prove, but it was true. Despite everything, the violence, the danger, the reality of what Lorenzo was, she was still standing in his doorway instead of running. Lorenzo crossed the room slowly, stopping close enough that Elena could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of whatever he'd done tonight. "You should be scared of me." "I am." "Then why are you still here?" "Because..." Elena struggled to find the words. "Because I think you did what you had to do. To protect Carlo, to protect your family. And maybe that makes me complicit. Maybe it makes me as bad as everyone says. But I understand why you did it, and I'm not going to judge you for surviving." Something in Lorenzo's expression cracked. He reached out, cupped her face with a hand that was still scraped from whatever fight he'd been in, and looked at her like he was seeing someone different than who he'd married. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "Neither are you." They stood there, caught in a moment that felt fragile and dangerous, until Lorenzo's phone rang and shattered it. He answered, listened, his expression going dark. "When?" A pause. "I'll be there in an hour." He hung up, already moving. "I have to go. Salvatore needs me at the estate." "What happened?" Torino responded. "He's threatening to go public with everything. Our business, the alliance, all of it. We need to contain this before it becomes a bigger problem." Lorenzo grabbed a clean shirt, changed quickly. "Stay here. Don't go out. Don't answer the door. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Lorenzo." "Elena, please, just this once. Don't argue. Stay here where it's safe." He left before she could respond, and Elena was alone again in the too quiet penthouse. She tried to sleep but couldn't, tried to eat but had no appetite, ended up pacing the living room and thinking about blood and violence, and the fact that she'd just told Lorenzo Vieri she understood why he killed people. What did that make her? The day crawled by. Elena checked her phone obsessively, but got nothing from Lorenzo except one text around noon. "Still dealing with this. Might be late. You okay?" She typed back, "Fine. Be careful." His response was immediate. "Always." By evening, Elena was climbing the walls. She turned on the TV, found a movie, couldn't focus. Made coffee, let it go cold, stood at the windows and watched the city light up as night fell, wondering where Lorenzo was and whether he was safe. Her phone rang just after 8. Unknown number. Elena almost didn't answer, remembered Lorenzo's warning about not talking to strangers, but something made her pick up. Hello? Elena Carter? A man's voice, smooth and unfamiliar. Or should I say, Elena Vieri now? Her blood went cold. Who is this? A friend. Someone concerned about your well-being. The man chuckled. You're in over your head, sweetheart. Married to a murderer. Caught up in a war that's going to get you killed. But I can help you. I can get you out. I don't need your help. You will. Soon. When Lorenzo can't protect you anymore. When his family turns on him. When everything falls apart. And it will fall apart, Elena. I promise you that. You'll wish you'd taken my offer. Who the hell are you? Tell Lorenzo that Marcus Torino sends his regards. And Elena, watch your back. The people closest to you are often the most dangerous. He hung up. Elena stood there shaking, the phone still pressed to her ear, and felt the world tilt sideways. Torino had her number, knew where she lived, was threatening her directly. She called Lorenzo immediately, voicemail, texted him. Torino called me. He knows my number. No response. Elena tried to stay calm, tried to think rationally, but panic was setting in. She was alone, exposed, and the man who'd just threatened Chicago was now threatening her. She needed to tell someone, needed help, needed... The lights went out. Every light in the penthouse all at once plunging her into darkness. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she fumbled for her phone, used it as a flashlight. The building's backup generator should have kicked in immediately. They didn't. Someone had cut the power, on purpose. Elena moved toward her bedroom, thinking about the panic button Lorenzo had shown her on her first day, a switch hidden behind a painting that would alert his security. She was almost there when she heard it, the front door opening. She froze, listening. Footsteps in the hallway, heavy and deliberate. More than one person. They weren't trying to be quiet. Elena ran, stumbling in the dark toward the bedroom, her hands shaking so badly she could barely work the doorknob. She slammed it shut, locked it, shoved a chair under the handle, like that would do anything against people who'd already bypassed the penthouse's security. Where was the panic button? Behind which painting? Her mind went blank, terror overriding everything Lorenzo had taught her. The bedroom door shuddered as someone hit it from the other side. Once. Twice. The chair wouldn't hold. Elena grabbed her phone, dialed 911, heard the operator answer. Someone's breaking into my apartment. She gasped out the address. Please, I need... The door burst open, the chair splintering like kindling. Two men filled the doorway, backlit by emergency lighting from the hallway. Elena couldn't see their faces, could only see them moving toward her. She did the only thing she could think of. She screamed. One of the men lunged. Elena threw her phone at him, backed into the corner, and felt her legs hit the bed. She was trapped. No way out. This was how it ended. Gunshots exploded through the penthouse. So loud, Elena's ears rang. The men in her doorway turned, surprised, and then Lorenzo was there, appearing like something out of a nightmare, gun in hand and fury on his face. He shot the first man without hesitation. The second tried to run, and Lorenzo shot him too, both bodies dropping like puppets with cut strings. Then he was across the room, grabbing Elena, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Elena, look at me. Are you hurt? She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, just shook her head while her whole body trembled. It's okay. You're safe. I've got you. Lorenzo pulled her against his chest, one arm tight around her while he kept the gun ready in his other hand. Building security's been compromised. We need to move. Can you walk? Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Lorenzo half carried her through the penthouse, stepping over bodies without looking at them, moving with the kind of lethal efficiency that suggested he'd done this before. More gunshots echoed from somewhere else in the building, shouting, chaos. They made it to the stairwell, started descending. Lorenzo's phone rang, and he answered without breaking stride. Salvatore. Yeah, we're both alive. Building's compromised. Torino's people got past security. He listened, jaw tight. Understood. We'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, kept moving. Elena focused on putting one foot in front of the other, her mind refusing to process what had just happened. The bodies, the blood. The way Lorenzo had killed 2 men to save her without even blinking. They reached the parking garage. Lorenzo's car was waiting, engine already running. Someone had prepared an escape route. He bundled Elena into the passenger seat, took off before she'd even fastened her seatbelt. Where are we going? She managed. Salvatore's estate. It's the safest place right now. Lorenzo drove with one hand, the other still holding his gun. Torino made his move. He was hoping to kill me, take you hostage, use you as leverage, but he underestimated how fast I could get back. He called me. Before the power went out, he said, Elena's voice broke. He said I was in over my head, that I should have taken his offer. Lorenzo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. What offer? He didn't say, just that when everything fell apart, I'd wish I'd listened. He's trying to scare you, make you doubt me, doubt the alliance. Classic intimidation tactic. But Lorenzo's voice was strained, and Elena realized he was more shaken than he was letting on. They drove in silence, speeding through New York like laws didn't apply to them. Maybe they didn't. Maybe when you were Lorenzo Vieri, fleeing from an assassination attempt, normal rules stopped mattering. At Salvatore's estate, they were met by armed guards who swept the car before letting them through the gates. The house was lit up like a fortress, every window blazing, people moving with military precision. Salvatore himself met them at the door, pulling Lorenzo into a fierce embrace. Thank God you're both alive. When I heard Torino hit your building, we're fine. But he got closer than he should have. Lorenzo kept Elena tucked against his side, protective in a way she'd never experienced. How did he get past our security? Someone on the inside. We're finding out who. Salvatore's gaze shifted to Elena, softening. You've had a terrible night, child. Carlotta will show you to a room where you can rest. I'm not leaving Lorenzo, Elena said, surprising herself. Elena, Lorenzo started. No, I'm not leaving you. Not after... She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't articulate the terror of those moments when she thought she was going to die, when Lorenzo had appeared like her mind had conjured him from desperate hope. Lorenzo looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed between them, an understanding maybe, or the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. She stays with me, he told Salvatore. His uncle raised an eyebrow but nodded. As you wish. Come, we have much to discuss. They gathered in Salvatore's study. Lorenzo, Salvatore, Carlo, and a handful of men Elena recognized from the family dinner. She sat in the corner trying to be invisible while her hands still shook and her mind replayed the sound of gunshots over and over. Torino crossed a line, Salvatore said, his voice dangerously calm. Attacking family in their homes. That's not business, that's war. He's getting desperate, Carlo added. The Chicago operation failed. He knows we're on to him. So he went after the one thing he thought would break Lorenzo's focus. All eyes turned to Elena. She felt herself shrinking under the attention, but Lorenzo moved to stand beside her chair, his hand settling on her shoulder. He failed, Lorenzo said flatly. Elena's safe, and now we know exactly how far Torino's willing to go. Which means we end this. Tonight. How? One of the other men asked. We hit him where it hurts. His operations, his money, his reputation, all of it, all at once. By tomorrow morning, Marcus Torino should be radioactive. Nobody will touch him, nobody will work with him, and he'll be so busy defending what's left that he won't have time to come after us. Salvatore leaned back, considering. That's aggressive. He tried to kill my wife. Aggressive is the only response. The possessiveness in that statement, my wife, sent something warm through Elena's chest despite everything. Lorenzo meant it. Maybe not the way a real husband would mean it, but he meant it nonetheless. Do it, Salvatore said, but carefully. We can't afford mistakes. The men scattered to make phone calls, coordinate attacks, mobilize resources. Elena watched them transform from businessmen into something else, something efficient and deadly. This was what they'd been trained for, she realized. Not just running legitimate businesses, but waging war when necessary. Lorenzo stayed with her, making his own calls in rapid Italian while his hand remained on her shoulder like an anchor. Finally, the room cleared except for the two of them, and he knelt in front of her chair so they were eye level. "Are you really okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. Am I supposed to be okay after people tried to kill me?" "No. You're supposed to be traumatized and angry and maybe a little broken. That's normal." His thumb traced circles on her knee, absent and soothing. "But you're still here, still functioning. That's what matters." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the carefully constructed walls to the person underneath. Lorenzo was scared too, she realized, not of Torino, not of the violence, but of losing something he'd convinced himself he didn't care about. "You saved my life," she said. "I did what any husband would do." "We both know you're not any husband." Lorenzo's mouth twitched. "No, I guess I'm not." He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on! You need to eat something, and then you need to sleep. Real sleep, not whatever you've been doing the past few nights." "I can't sleep after." "You can, and you will, because tomorrow's going to be complicated, and I need you sharp." He guided her out of the study and through hallways that felt less threatening now, with armed guards at every turn. "Carlotta prepared a room for us. Well, for you. But I'm not letting you out of my sight tonight, so I guess it's for both of us." The room was beautiful in an old-world way. Four-poster bed, antique furniture, windows overlooking the gardens. Someone had laid out pajamas for Elena, toiletries, everything she might need. Carlotta's work, probably. "I'll be right outside," but Lorenzo said. "If you need anything, stay." The word came out before Elena could stop it. "Please, I don't want to be alone." Lorenzo hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll stay." Elena changed in the bathroom, her body moving on autopilot while her mind refused to settle. When she emerged, Lorenzo had shed his jacket and shoes, but was still fully dressed, sitting in an armchair by the window with his gun on the side table within easy reach. "You sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." "You need sleep too." "I'll sleep when Torino's not a threat anymore." Elena climbed into the massive bed, pulled the covers up, and felt tears finally start to fall. She'd been holding them back for hours, refusing to break. But now, in the safety of this room with Lorenzo standing guard, everything crashed down at once. She cried silently, face pressed into the pillow, until she felt the bed dip and Lorenzo's hand on her back. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now." "I was so scared," she whispered, "when those men came in, when I thought that was it, that I was going to die in that apartment and nobody would even care." "I would have cared." Lorenzo's voice was rough. "Elena, if something had happened to you—" He stopped, seemed to struggle with words he wasn't used to saying. "You matter. To me. More than you should for what this marriage was supposed to be. And I'm sorry I put you in danger. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better." Elena turned to look at him, saw guilt and something else, something vulnerable in his expression. "You did protect me. You came back in time. You saved me. Barely. If I'd been 5 minutes later, but you weren't. You were there when I needed you. That's what matters." Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, his hand still warm against her back. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Care about someone. Let them matter. I've spent my whole life keeping people at arm's length because caring is a weakness in my world. But you—" He shook his head. "You make it hard to keep that distance. Maybe you're not supposed to keep it. Maybe not. But I don't know what happens if I let you in, Elena. I don't know if I'm capable of being what you'd need." Elena sat up, facing him fully. "I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need romance or grand gestures or any of that fairy tale garbage. I just need you to be honest with me, to treat me like a person, not a possession. Can you do that?" "I can try. That's all I'm asking." They looked at each other in the dim light, and something shifted between them. something fundamental that changed the nature of everything that had come before. This wasn't a fake marriage anymore. It wasn't a transaction or a business arrangement. It was two people who'd survived something terrible together and found unexpected connection in the aftermath. Lorenzo leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her. It was nothing like the perfunctory kiss at their wedding. This was real, deliberate, full of emotion he didn't know how to express any other way. Elena kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it, and felt his hand cup her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers. "This is a terrible idea," he murmured. "Probably the worst. We should stop." "We should?" Neither of them moved. Elena's hands had found their way to Lorenzo's chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her palms. He was scared too, she realized. Scared of this, of what it meant, of where it might lead. "Stay with me," Elena said. "Not in the chair. Here." Lorenzo pulled back just enough to search her face. "Are you sure?" "I'm not sure about anything anymore, but I know I don't want to be alone tonight, and I know I trust you more than I should. So yes, stay." He kicked off his remaining clothes down to his undershirt and pants, settled beside her in the bed, and pulled her against his chest. Elena fit there like she'd been designed for that exact space, her head tucked under his chin, his arms wrapped around her. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not letting me die. For caring enough to come back. For being more than what I expected." Lorenzo's arms tightened. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be rough." But Elena was already drifting off, exhaustion finally winning, safe in a way she hadn't felt since this whole thing started. She woke to daylight and voices outside the door. Lorenzo was already up, dressed, on the phone speaking in clipped Italian. When he saw she was awake, he ended the call. "It's done," he said. "Torino's operations are in shambles. The Fed's got an anonymous tip about his money laundering. They're freezing his accounts as we speak. His allies are distancing themselves. By noon, he'll be completely isolated." "Is he going to retaliate?" "He can try, but he won't get far. Salvatore's made it very clear what happens to people who come after family." Lorenzo sat on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I survived something I shouldn't have." "That's accurate." He brushed hair from her face, the gesture tender in a way she'd never expected from him. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you want out of this marriage, this life, all of it? Because I can arrange it. You'd be protected, financially set, free to go wherever you want. No judgment, no consequences." Elena's chest tightened. "Is that what you want?" "I'm asking what you want." She thought about it, really thought about it. Leaving would be easier, safer. She could go back to her old life, rebuild without the constant threat of violence, without being complicit in things that probably kept her from sleeping at night. But she'd also be leaving Lorenzo. This complicated, damaged man who'd somehow become more than just a means to an end. Who'd risked his life to save hers, who'd held her while she cried, who'd kissed her like she mattered. "I want to stay," Elena said. "Not because of the contract or the money or saving my father's company. I want to stay because of you. Because somewhere in this mess, I started caring about you, and I want to see where that goes." Lorenzo's expression did something complicated. Surprise, relief, fear, hope, all tangled together. "Even knowing what I am, what I've done?" "Even knowing all of it. You're not a good man, Lorenzo. But you're not the monster everyone thinks you are either. You're just complicated. And I think I'm okay with complicated." He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was trying to memorize the feeling. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." They stayed there for a moment, tangled together in the morning light, until reality intruded in the form of Carlotta knocking on the door. "Lorenzo, your uncle needs you, now." The urgency in her voice got them both moving. They dressed quickly and found Salvatore in his study, looking grim. "Torino's dead," he said without preamble. "Suicide, according to the initial reports. Gun in his hand, note beside him saying he couldn't live with the shame of his failures." Lorenzo's expression went carefully blank. "Suicide. That's the official story, and it's the story we're all going to stick with. Understood?" It wasn't suicide, Elena realized. Someone had killed Torino and made it look like he'd killed himself. Maybe Salvatore's people, maybe Lorenzo's, maybe someone else entirely, but it was murder dressed up as convenient resolution. "Understood," Lorenzo said. Salvatore's gaze shifted to Elena. "You've seen and heard a lot in the past few days, things that could cause problems if they became public. I need to know you can be trusted to keep family business private." It was a test and a threat wrapped together. Elena met his eyes and didn't flinch. "I'm family now. Family protects family. You have my word." Salvatore studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "You're tougher than you look, Elena Vieri. My nephew chose well." He turned back to Lorenzo. "The Chicago situation is resolved. Carlo's territory is secure, and Torino's no longer a threat, which means you can finally focus on your own life instead of constantly putting out fires." "What does that mean?" "It means I think you've earned some time. Take your wife home. Build something real with her instead of just playing house. You deserve that, Lorenzo. Both of you do." Walking out of Salvatore's estate felt like walking out of a war zone. Elena's body was heavy with exhaustion and relief and the weight of everything that had happened. Lorenzo kept her close, his hand on the small of her back, protective but also possessive in a way that felt different now. In the car, Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "What happens now?" "Now? We go home. We figure out how to be married for real instead of just for show. We build something that isn't based on contracts and desperation." Lorenzo's fingers laced through hers. "And we try to be happy, however that looks." "You think we can? Be happy?" "I think we've survived everything else. Happiness might actually be easier." They drove back to the city in comfortable silence, watching New York wake up to a morning that felt different somehow. The penthouse had been cleaned and secured, all evidence of the attack erased like it never happened. But Elena would carry the memory of those moments forever. The terror, the gunshots, the way Lorenzo had appeared like salvation. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in ways Elena couldn't have predicted. Lorenzo started coming home earlier, trading late-night business calls for dinners with her. They talked, really talked, about their pasts, their fears, their hopes for whatever future they were building. He introduced her to parts of his world that were legitimate, businesses he was trying to transition into legal territory, foundations he supported that helped at-risk kids avoid the life he'd lived. "I want to do something good," he told her one night, standing in his office surrounded by papers. "Build something that isn't just about money or power, something that matters." Elena helped him research options, discovered she had a talent for organization and strategy that had been wasted on her failed marriage to Marcus. Together they started planning a foundation focused on helping struggling businesses transition to sustainable models, exactly the kind of help Carter Textiles had needed but couldn't afford. Her father noticed the change in her. "You're happy?" he said during one of their weekly lunches. "Really happy. I can see it on your face." "I am," Elena admitted, and realized it was true. Despite everything, the violence, the fear, the moral compromises, she was happier than she'd been in years. Lorenzo saw her, valued her, treated her like a partner instead of an accessory. He asked her opinion on business decisions, trusted her judgment, made space for her in his life in ways Marcus never had. "Lorenzo's good for you," her father continued. "I knew it the moment I met him. He looks at you like you're the most important thing in the world." Elena thought about that look, the way Lorenzo's eyes softened when he saw her, the way his whole demeanor changed when she entered a room. It wasn't performance anymore. It was real. 3 months after the Torino incident, Lorenzo came home with an unusual expression, nervous maybe, or uncertain. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. Elena's stomach dropped. "Okay. Our marriage, the contract, it was supposed to be 18 months, then we divorce and go our separate ways." He sat beside her on the couch, took her hand. I don't want that anymore. I don't want to divorce you, don't want you to go anywhere. I want this to be real, permanent, but only if that's what you want too. Relief flooded through her. You're asking me to stay married to you? For real this time? I'm asking if you'll choose me again, not because of money or contracts or saving your father's company, but because you want to, because this marriage is worth keeping. Elena thought about the girl who'd stepped into Lorenzo's car that rainy night, desperate and broken and out of options. She'd been surviving, not living, going through motions because she didn't know what else to do. And now here she was, married to a complicated man with blood on his hands and surprising gentleness in his heart, building something that felt more real than anything she'd had before. Yes, she said. I choose you. I choose us. For real this time. Lorenzo's smile was brilliant and rare and worth everything she'd been through to get here. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a different ring. Not the massive diamond from their fake wedding, but something simpler, more personal. A sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, elegant and understated. I want to do this right, he said. Marry you again, but this time because we love each other. Not in some Vegas chapel, but somewhere that matters. With your father there, with my family, with everyone who's important to us. What do you think? I think you're secretly a romantic under all that cynicism. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. They planned the ceremony for spring in the gardens at Salvatore's estate. It was small, just family and close friends, but it felt more significant than any big wedding could have been. Elena's father walked her down the makeshift aisle, tears streaming down his face, while Lorenzo waited at the end, looking like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. You're sure about this? Her father whispered. It's not too late to run. I'm sure, Dad. He's a good man. Complicated, but good. He better be, or he'll have me to answer to. The ceremony was simple. They exchanged the same vows that millions of couples had exchanged before them, but this time the words meant something. When Lorenzo slid the sapphire ring onto her finger, his hand shook slightly, and Elena realized he was just as affected as she was. I love you, he said, quiet enough that only she could hear. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. You already do, Elena whispered back, just by being honest with me, by letting me see who you really are. They kissed as husband and wife, real husband and wife this time, and the applause that followed felt like vindication. They'd started this as a business arrangement and somehow found something genuine in the wreckage. The reception was warm and full of laughter, so different from the tense family dinner months ago. Even Marco approached them, slightly drunk, and clapped Lorenzo on the shoulder. You did it, he said. Found something real in all this mess. I'm jealous, cousin, and happy for you, both of you. Thanks, Marco. Just don't forget about the rest of us now that you've gone soft. But he was smiling when he said it, and Elena realized he meant it as a blessing, not an insult. Carlotta cornered Elena near the end of the night, pressed another card into her hand. Same number, she said. Still valid. You ever need anything, you call me. Understood? Understood. Thank you for everything. Thank Lorenzo. He's the one who fought for you, who changed the rules for you. Carlotta kissed her cheek. But you changed him too. Made him human again. That's worth more than you know. As the party wound down and guests departed, Elena found herself alone with Lorenzo in the gardens, the same place Carlotta had given her that first piece of advice months ago. Happy? Lorenzo asked, pulling her close. Terrified, Elena admitted. But happy. Is that normal? I think for people like us, terrified and happy might be the same thing. He rested his chin on top of her head. I know this isn't a fairy tale. I know there's still going to be hard days, dangerous situations, times when you question whether this was worth it. But I promise I'll fight for us. For this. For whatever future we're building. I know. That's why I'm here. They stood there as night fell, wrapped in each other, and Elena thought about transformation. She'd come to Lorenzo as a broken woman looking for salvation and found something better, partnership, respect, love, that had grown in the darkest soil imaginable. She'd learned that sometimes the things you choose out of desperation turn out to be exactly what you needed, even if you didn't know it at the time. 6 months later, Elena stood in their penthouse. No longer Lorenzo's penthouse, but theirs, filled with her touches and their shared life, and felt the first flutter of movement in her belly. She'd found out 2 weeks ago, but hadn't told Lorenzo yet, waiting for the right moment. He came home that evening, tired from meetings, but smiling when he saw her. "Good day?" he asked, kissing her hello. "Interesting day. I have news." "Good news or bad news?" "Depends on your perspective." Elena took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby. In about 6 months, give or take." Lorenzo went very still, his expression cycling through shock, fear, and then something like wonder. "A baby. We're having a baby. Is that okay? I know we never talked about—" He kissed her, cutting off her words, and when he pulled back there were tears in his eyes. "It's more than okay. It's everything. You're everything." "We're going to screw this up," Elena said, laughing and crying at the same time. "We have no idea what we're doing." "We'll figure it out. Same way we figured out everything else. Together, scared, making it up as we go." That night they lay in bed, Lorenzo's hand on her stomach like he was already protecting someone who wouldn't exist for months yet, and talked about the future, about raising a child in their complicated world, about teaching them to be better than their parents, about building something that lasted beyond themselves. "I never thought I'd have this," Lorenzo admitted in the dark. "Family, real family, something worth protecting that wasn't just business or money or power. You have it now. We both do." "Yeah, we do." The baby came in February, a boy they named after Elena's father. Robert Lorenzo Vieri arrived screaming and perfect, and watching Lorenzo hold his son for the first time, Elena saw the final wall come down. He looked at that tiny baby with such fierce love and protectiveness that she knew everything, all the fear, all the violence, all the impossible choices had been worth it to get here. Her father came to visit, held his grandson, and looked at Elena with such pride it made her chest ache. "Your mother would have loved this," he said. "Seeing you happy, seeing you with a family of your own. She worried about you, worried you'd never find someone who deserved you. I found someone who didn't deserve me but chose to become someone who did. That's better, I think. Much better." Her father kissed her forehead. "You did good, sweetheart. Built something real from nothing. That takes courage." After he left, Elena stood in the nursery watching Lorenzo change their son's diaper with the kind of concentrated focus he usually reserved for business deals. He was singing softly in Italian, some lullaby his mother must have sung to him, and their son was watching him with wide eyes. This was her life now. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real and hard-won and worth every sacrifice it had taken to build it. She'd married a stranger to save her family's legacy and found something better, a partner who'd helped her save herself. Lorenzo looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. "Come here." Elena joined them, and Lorenzo wrapped his free arm around her waist, pulling her close so the three of them stood together in the soft light of the nursery. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For saying yes that night in the rain, for taking a chance on me, for staying when you could have left, for giving me this—" He gestured to their son, to the room, to the life they'd built. "All of this. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful for it every day." "You do deserve it. You've worked hard to become someone who could have this. That's what matters." Outside, the city hummed with life, full of people making their own impossible choices, fighting their own battles, trying to survive in a world that didn't make surviving easy. Elena thought about the girl she'd been, desperate, broken, out of options, and felt grateful for every choice that had led her here, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. Because sometimes the things that save you don't look like salvation at first. Sometimes they look like danger, like risk, like the worst possible decision you could make. But if you're brave enough to see past the surface, past the fear and the stigma and the judgment, you might find something worth fighting for. Elena had found Lorenzo, and Lorenzo had found her. And together they'd built something that neither of them could have built alone. a family, a future, a foundation for something better than what they'd started with. The foundation they'd planned became real 6 months later, operating out of an office downtown with Elena as director and Lorenzo as primary benefactor. They helped struggling businesses find their footing, provided low-interest loans and strategic consulting, focused on the kinds of companies that banks had given up on. Carter Textiles was their first success story, fully recovered and expanding into sustainable fabrics, her father back at the helm and thriving. But they helped others too, dozens of them. Family businesses on the edge of bankruptcy, immigrant entrepreneurs who couldn't get traditional financing, people who reminded Elena of herself, desperate but capable, needing a chance more than charity. "We're doing something good," she told Lorenzo one night after a particularly successful quarter. "Real good, not just tax write-offs or reputation management. We're actually helping people." That was always the point, build something that matters beyond us. He pulled her close, their son asleep in the next room, the city quiet outside their windows. "I spent too many years building empires of violence and fear. Maybe this is how I make up for it." You can't make up for the past, but you can choose better for the future. That's what I'm doing, choosing better, choosing you, choosing this life, choosing to be someone my son can be proud of. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when Elena questioned whether she'd made the right choices. Lorenzo's past didn't disappear just because he wanted it to. There were still obligations to his family, still situations that required him to make impossible decisions, still blood on his hands that no amount of philanthropy could wash away. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. Years passed. Their son grew, learned to walk and talk and navigate the complicated world he'd been born into. They had a daughter 2 years later, a fierce little thing with Elena's stubborn streak and Lorenzo's dark eyes. The penthouse filled with toys and laughter and the beautiful chaos of family life. Lorenzo transitioned more of his operations to legitimate business, slowly extracting himself from the violent world that had defined him for so long. It wasn't easy. Men like him didn't just walk away, but with Salvatore's blessing and careful planning, he managed it. Not completely, never completely, but enough that he could sleep at night knowing he was building something clean for his children. Elena watched him change, watched him soften in ways she never would have predicted, and felt grateful for whatever cosmic accident had put her in his car that rainy night. She'd saved her father's company, yes, but she'd also saved herself, found strength she didn't know she had, built a life she couldn't have imagined, became someone she was proud to be. On their 5-year anniversary, the real one, not the Vegas one, they renewed their vows again. Just the two of them this time. No witnesses except their children and the life they'd built. Lorenzo had aged well, silver threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes that came from laughter now instead of stress. 5 years, sis, he said, holding both her hands. 5 years of being married to you for real. Best decision I ever made. Best decision we ever made, Elena corrected. I chose you too, remember? How could I forget? You chose me when you shouldn't have, when it made no sense, when everyone would have told you to run. And you're still here. Still here. Always here. They kissed as the sun set over the city, their children playing in the garden behind them, and Elena thought about transformation again, about how people aren't fixed. They're always changing, always becoming something new. Lorenzo had been a violent man when she met him, someone capable of terrible things. He still was, probably, under the right circumstances. But he was also a father, a husband, a philanthropist trying to do better. And Elena herself had changed too. From a broken divorcee with no options to a woman who'd built a foundation, raised children, partnered with one of the most dangerous men in New York, and somehow made it work. She'd learned that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being terrified and choosing to stay anyway. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated and built on foundations that would make most people uncomfortable. But it was theirs, earned through blood and tears and impossible choices, and that made it real in ways fairy tales could never be. As night fell and they gathered their children to go inside, Elena looked at Lorenzo, really looked at him, and saw everything they'd survived to get here. The fear, the violence, the desperate bargain that had somehow become the best thing in both their lives. I love you, she said, simple and true. Lorenzo smiled, the real smile he saved just for her. I love you too, even though you're way too good for me. Probably, but you're stuck with me anyway. Thank God for that. They walked inside together, a family built from desperation and transformed by choice, and Elena felt complete in a way she'd never expected to feel again. This was what she'd been searching for that rainy night when she'd almost stepped into traffic. Not salvation, not rescue, but partnership. Someone who saw her fully and chose her anyway. Someone who let her see them and trusted her with that vulnerability. Lorenzo had given her that, and she'd given it back to him. And together they'd built something that neither of them could have built alone. A life worth living, a love worth fighting for, a future worth believing in. The foundation kept growing. Their children thrived. The years accumulated, each one adding new layers to the life they'd constructed from impossible circumstances. And through it all, Elena and Lorenzo held on to each other, held on to the truth that had saved them both. Sometimes the worst decisions turn out to be the best ones, if you're brave enough to see them through. Sometimes salvation doesn't look like safety. Sometimes it looks like danger, like risk, like a sleek black car stopping in the rain and a dangerous man offering an impossible deal. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really capable of. Sometimes you have to marry a stranger to discover who you really are. Elena had done all that, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat, because the life she'd built with Lorenzo, messy and complicated and imperfect as it was hers. Truly, completely, undeniably hers. And that was worth everything it had cost to create it.